Good afternoon and welcome to our Board of Supervisors meeting here on Monday, May 14th, I believe it is. And so we're going to start out with a roll call from Nikki when she's ready.
Supervisor Bone.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Arroyo?
Here.
Supervisor Wilson?
Present.
Supervisor Madrone?
Present.
Supervisor Bushnell?
Hello.
And Supervisor Bone is absent.
Okay, great. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you very much. And do we have any modifications to the agenda?
No, Chair Madrone, there are no modifications.
And nothing pulled from the nothing consent agenda?
Correct.
Very good. Yes, we just are here for one very important reason today, and that is to hear from our department heads on our budget process. So could you lead us into that discussion, please, CAO Hayes?
Yes, Chair Madrone. We are well underway in the budget development for fiscal year 23-24, and as we have done for a number of years, we provide your department heads an opportunity to come present to your board on their challenges and opportunities that they may be facing in the coming budget year. It's also an opportunity for your board to engage with department heads on any questions or concerns or feedback that you have regarding their budget development, so that we can finalize that picture and return to your board on June 6th when we'll propose the budget. We'll then hold budget hearings on June 12th and ideally adopt a budget by June 27th in time to start the new fiscal year out. First up for presentation is the assessor.
Great.
Howard Leahy is here and does not have a PowerPoint presentation.
Great. Well, and I just want to say today we do have a lot of presentations, so we're absolutely going to appreciate brevity and conciseness and to the point. I think we all know we're struggling with a budget deficit, and we're going to try and work our way through this, so I will end right there on the issue of brevity. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Madrone and Board of Supervisors.
Is that button pressed?
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, we get a little bit closer here.
Speak into the mic, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Chair Madrone and Board of Supervisors. As you know, I'm Howard Leahy, the newly elected assessor this year. This is my first time going through this process solo, so bear with me. The assessor's office is responsible for fair, equitable discovery and valuation of all taxable property in the county. We are directed by the California Constitution, Revenue Taxation Code, and we're overseen by the Board of Equalization. Every 5 years, the county assessor is evaluated, surveyed by the Board of Equalization, and to make sure that we're in compliance with state laws and codes, and making sure that we're following the Constitution. And we do get reviewed when we are not meeting those. Fortunately, our office has always met the requirements by the Board of Equalization. Each year we create a certified assessment roll, and that gets turned over to the auditor controller and eventually to the treasurer tax collector to send out tax bills. Property taxes are the largest source of discretionary revenue for the county general fund. Last year, the assessed value created about $15.6 billion in assessment, which creates about $156 million in property taxes, of which about 16% of that would go to the general fund, which is approximately around 26 million. So it's important that we function and have the staffing to do our due diligence and do the assessments that we need to do. We currently have 29 staff. That includes 4 different departments. We have our transfer department, we have our front office, which is the support staff, and is the first contact that the public either comes into the counter or phone call. And then we have our business property and our real property department. Each year we process about 6,000 change of ownership, and we also process in the neighborhood about 3,600 reappraisals every year, and that includes change of ownership. Plus, we have new construction, Prop 8, which is a decline in market value, in our business properties as well. The business property division sends out in the neighborhood of 6,200 statements to all the businesses, aircraft, boats, vessels, anything that's taxable. Those have to be processed on a yearly basis. So it's critical that we have staff in place to do that. So we've submitted a request for $204,000 in additional funding. If we don't receive that, there's a potential of losing some staff, which would be detrimental not only to the department but the county, and giving us the ability to process and assess properties for property tax purposes. Currently, the preliminary estimates on the roll for this coming year is about a 4% increase over last year. That could change as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, but that's the bright side. We have seen real estate has really been doing well. Property values haven't really decreased a lot. It's kind of stabilized recently because of interest rates going up, but we have seen the value of property has really stabilized and hasn't really gone down yet, and hopefully not too much. Some of the things that we are working on to try to, we have kind of fine-tune and streamline some processes internally. So some of the things we're looking at are working with our property tax database administrator, which is called Megabyte Systems, and to streamline some of our appraisal processes, as well as some new software to process our deeds as well, which would be more of an automatic process. Unfortunately, right now we have about a backlog of about 4 months in processing change of ownership deeds, and the goal is to become present with that. It's best for not only the county but for the taxpayer as well. We are also looking at increasing our e-filing for business property statements. We had approximately 1,300 last year. We're hoping to see that increase, because not only is that a benefit to the businesses, it's also helps streamline the process internally as well. And in the last few years, we've gone through a lot of changes. We've learned a lot of things. There's a thing called COVID that we all went through. We learned to be a little bit more sufficient internally. And, we've learned some new communication skills. I mean, before that, I didn't really know what Zoom was. And, now between Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and, being able to work remotely if needed. So there's a lot of different skills that we've developed during the pandemic. And we hope to continue streamlining some of our internal processes as well. So some of our goals, like I said earlier, is to complete and process the assessment roll timely and accurately, and eliminate our backlog in those. Also continue providing excellent customer service to the public, and make sure they're treated fairly. And that's pretty much all I had. And
Great.
do you have any questions for me?
Gold star for brevity. And the amount of time you spend up here does not equate directly to any budget decisions, I'll say, except
Well, I
we
just
do have
wanted
a
to
lot
make
on
su-
our plate, so
Yeah,
thank you for
excuse
that.
me. I just wanted to make sure I touched the highlights of, our office and the achievements we've made and what we plan to try to achieve in the near future.
Absolutely, great, thank you for that. And any comments, questions from the board? No, and I'm just curious, as far as the way this meeting will work today, as far as public comment, do we do that at the end of all the presentations?
I would suggest one opportunity at the end of the
Okay,
presentations.
so for those members of the public who may be here today or on Zoom, are there any on Zoom today?
No,
Nikki?
Chair Madrone, there's nobody at this point anyway.
Nobody at this point in Zoom. At any rate, we'll take public comments at the very end, and there is no public comment on non-agenda items today because this is a special meeting. We'll do that tomorrow at our regular meeting. All right, thank you very much.
All right, thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And our next item.
All right, Chair Madrone, next up is Cody Rogatz, your aviation director.
Great.
And Cody does have a PowerPoint, I do believe. Also with Cody is the lovely Kathy Canepa. Did I say that right? Did I pronounce it? Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Madrone and Board of Supervisors for having us here today. We do have a PowerPoint, and I did bring assistance with Kathy Canepa. Thank you, Nikki, for the help there. Before we get going into the presentation, I brought Kathy along because we have a very robust and rapidly changing budget and have had for the past few years, with several $1 million coming in through multiple avenues of grants, including the AIP, the Airport Improvement Program that the FAA administers, as well as the CARES Act and a couple others. Kathy has grown in our organization, so I wanted to bring her along to highlight all the help she's provided. In that rapidly changing environment, we've also received a ton of help from Karen Clower and the CAO team. Risk management, county council have helped us process a lot of things very quickly, including even last week, to get things out the door as timelines change, deadlines change from the FAA in these different pools of funding. So the capital projects that we're about to embark upon, starting here in just a few weeks now, that is highlighted at the top there with the $24 million for runway rehab and electrical improvements. That project will kick off on June 5th and will include electrical upgrades to in-pavement and edge lighting on the primary runway at ACV. Starting on June 5th, we will have 60 days of overnight closures. Those will include Sunday through Thursday every single week from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And that will allow the electricians to replace a few lights each night. And within those 60 days, they'll be able to complete that process. At which point, we will then roll into milling 2 inches off of the runway surface and adding 6 fresh new inches of asphalt. The expected useful life of that new asphalt will be 10 to 20 years and will allow us to continue to have the larger aircraft operations that we've grown into here over the past few years with the 737 and larger regional jets operating on a daily basis at ACV. Second is the ACV parking lot rehabilitation. I'll cover that in a little more detail in a slide or two. We're also working on kicking off multiple different banks of hangar replacements and or rehabs at our 3 largest general aviation facilities along the 101 corridor throughout Humboldt County. And then at Murray Field, we'll be doing, starting next year, some runway rehabilitation work, which will include crack sealing and then a seal coat on that runway surface and new markings. The funding breakdown is there below. So if you add the top and add the bottom, that's where we put all of that together. You'll notice in there a $2.5 million local share. So for right around $35 million in projects, the county or local share is $2.5 million, which we've been able to generate through some of those CARES Act funds as well. So very minimal impact at the local level. The capital projects I mentioned with the parking lot, this is a rendition of what the parking lot rehab would look like. You'll notice a different entry and exit location. It will also allow for greater efficiencies for people, especially on the exiting. As you know, not everybody shows up for their flight at the same time, but everybody arrives at the same time. And with our current configuration, that can cause delays for people exiting the parking lots of 30 to 45 minutes, as we sometimes have a line of north of 50 vehicles trying to get out of an antiquated configuration as far as the parking lot setup.
So fiscal year to date, we've spent $2.5 million in equipment acquisitions. That includes some of the equipment that's pictured on the right there. On the top left is the Cyclone rubber and paint removal equipment. Top right is a terminal floor cleaning machine. A couple photos in there of some tractors and mowers, runway closure markers on the bottom right there, crack seal equipment, and then a skid steer on the bottom left. In fiscal year 23-24, we've budgeted, our proposed budget includes $500,000, which includes a man lift that can help service exterior and interior lights, a pressure washer with water tender trailer, an updated sweeper machine, and potentially 2 EV vehicles.
Just want to highlight on that last bullet point there, the electric vehicles. One of those we are anticipating we'll be acquiring as the parking lot, and I failed to mention this on the last slide. We are anticipating up to 50, depending on what we can afford budget-wise, up to 50 spots for electric vehicle charging. We anticipate utilizing one of those to charge our own vehicle that we utilize for operating and maintaining the airports, and that's through a partnership with RCEA and Schatz Energy Research Center, the same team that helped us with the construction of the microgrid over the past several years. What have all these equipment acquisitions and associated maintenance work meant? We have gotten a lot more staff time at our outlying facilities, particularly Murray Field, Ronerville Airport, and Garberville Airport. We've also had additional hours we've been able to dedicate to the Neyland and Dinsmore airports, and we feel gotten them looking much better than they have in the past. And that's not just by our own measuring stick, but that's also by the feedback that we receive from users and the public. On the air service front, obviously we've had some huge wins over the past several years and a few losses, but I just wanted to highlight here for the board that overall we're in much better shape than we were 4 years ago. Sorry it's so small, but in March of 2019, we had an average daily seat departure of just over 200 seats available in and out of our market. In March of this year, so just a couple months ago, we were over double that number. So even with the big wins and a few losses, we've over doubled the amount of available seats. And as we've talked about before in other meetings, we are still strongly pursuing a northbound route with the Small Community Air Services Development Grant of $850,000 that we were allocated from the USDOT. And a couple of other opportunities we hope to be talking about next year.
So our department manages over 150 different agreements in various forms. So we have license agreements, leases, concessionary agreements, rental car agreements. And currently we track those via Excel and then the financial component through QuickBooks. In doing so, it's very inefficient and labor intensive. If you need to update information in one spreadsheet, it affects others, and then you have to update in QuickBooks. It's also inaccurate because of how many times we're touching the information. There's missed efficiencies there, and then the cost associated with staff time to do so. So we are looking into kind of a one-stop shop software that's aviation specific that will incorporate many of these things that of course integrates with the county's financial software that kind of manages finance for us at the more 30,000 foot view. The software we're looking at, we're demoing right now. The cost is budgeted in our fiscal year 23-24 budget. It would be a time cost savings to us to implement such a thing, and it would be a one-time cost for implementation and then minor annual costs thereafter. It also has the potential to integrate other parts of our department into this centralized system. Our operations team and their inspections of runways, grant tracking, and then tenant portals where the tenants can actually interact with the software, update their information on our behalf, get copies of their agreements, et cetera.
So in conclusion, for our department, I know that the board has been contemplating and the CAO has been contemplating some potential stressful times ahead in regards to the county's overall budget. And things are a little different in aviation, but we're still working very closely with Alicia and her team and taking that into consideration. And we're trying to plan for the next couple budget years, so 24, 25, and 25, 26. And setting ourselves up for success as far as stockpiling resources to get us through for our maintenance needs over the next few years and trying to balance the budget in years to come as well with minimizing or not having at all, as we've had the past several years, any general fund contribution.
Okay. Great. Any questions from the board?
Not even for the new face?
Good job. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you.
All right, Chair Madrone and board. Next, we have Bennett Hoffman, the Child Support Services Director. And Bennett also has a PowerPoint. Nikki?
Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Bennett Hoffman, the Director of Child Support Services. Thank you, Supervisors, for allowing a presentation by our department today. I'm going to start with some background on the child support program. It's federally required. In California, the way the department's run is the state Department of Child Support Services oversees and supervises the department, but it is administered at the local level by the counties. In Humboldt County, we are one of 8 regional child support agencies. That means that we've decided to combine with another county to provide child support services. So we are the North Coast Child Support Program, and that's Humboldt and Trinity counties. Humboldt is the lead county. Regionalization started at the end of 2015, and that agreement was renewed by both of your boards for a 5-year period in December of 2021. Up until June of this year, we will have Trinity and Humboldt County employees. In June, our lone Trinity County employee is retiring, so after that, both departments and both offices in Trinity and Humboldt County will be staffed by Humboldt County employees. As far as funding goes, our program is federally and state funded. The federal government supplies about 66% of the funding, the state matches the rest. And we don't receive any allocation from either county general fund. Our allocation is determined by the State Department of Child Support Services. The state decides on how much money we get based on these 3 main factors. It's caseload size, it's average salary costs, and then there's a amount that's given for overhead and operating expenses. A couple challenges we've had over the last few years related to budgeting. We had a 14% cut in 2021 as a result of the pandemic. That money has never been restored. We've been flat funded at Humboldt County since that time. We expect that to continue. In fact, based on what the state has told us, it's either going to remain flat or go down over the next few years. The other challenge I have listed there isn't as much of an issue as it was the last couple years. The state does budgeting differently than the counties do. I guess what that means is that when we have an expense, if it's not posted right away, we don't get credit for it in this budget year. It could carry over to the next budget year. That made it really difficult to plan, and we had a few $100,000 that we had to carry over to another budget year in the past when postings weren't up to date, but that's not as much of an issue now. So revenue projections for this year, as I mentioned, our Humboldt County allocation is about the same as it's been for the last few years. We do get two separate allocations. We get another allocation from Trinity County. The good news is that one has actually gone up. Trinity County is considered an underfunded county by the state's methodology, so we've had a little bit more money to work with over the last couple years. The $500,000 is for the building remodel that we hope to complete this year. That's money that we haven't gotten for sure yet. We're going to ask for that money from the state once the building remodel is approved and we have a cost plan that we can move forward with. We've talked to the state about that. We expect them to provide that money to us. And overall, it's going to save us money in rent over the next few years as we can downsize. We have way too much space, way more space than we need. We're going to downsize and save probably about $100,000 a year in rent is what we're hoping. Just a little bit about the core purpose of our department. If you're familiar with child support at all, back in the 70s when the program was created, it was primarily created to recoup welfare money that was expended. The program's really tried to change its mission over the last few years and really tries to focus on both parents and act as a neutral facilitator. So we establish, we maintain, and we change court orders. We work with parents if they have barriers to paying those court orders so that they can provide the support that's required. We ensure the legal bond of parentage. We maintain payment records, and then we facilitate access to private health insurance. A few accomplishments I've listed. We have collected and distributed over $10 million to families in Humboldt and Trinity County in the last year. We are really focused over the last year in the diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have our own committee in our department that looks at that and just tries to use a equity lens when we're developing policies and practices. The State Department of Child Support also has a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer that we work closely with. Then we've done some planning for the remodel and space reduction. For a while, we were contracting with Napa County for caseworker services. We had to do that when we had a staff shortage. We've had a little bit more success hiring this year, so we're hoping that we can let that contract go over the next fiscal year, or at least reduce it. And then the one thing I wanted to mention is the staffing at McKinleyville Family Resource Center. We're a part of that resource center. We have 3 staff that work there, and so we always have at least one full-time person there. I wanted to mention it because our staff are just so excited about being part of that project. It is, from our standpoint, it's been a success for us. It allows us to collaborate with other departments. It allows our families to get services in one-stop shopping. Can't say enough good things about how excited we are to be part of that. And just building off of that, what we're going to continue to focus on over the next year is we want to get back to community outreach activities. That's kind of fallen by the wayside because of the pandemic primarily. But we really want to be involved in more community outreach activities. We know that child support is something that not everybody understands or they know about what we do. That's part of the challenge we have in the program statewide. And we also want to provide more in-person services in remote areas of the county. McKinleyville Center is an example where we have a staff there full-time. We want to do that with other areas, northern, southern parts of the counties. Maybe not be there full-time, but be available part of the time if families want to come in and see us in person. So we're working with a couple different agencies. We're going to talk to the libraries. Economic development also possibly has some space we could share with them. We're hoping to do something positive in that area over the next year. That's all I have. Do you have any questions for me?
Questions from the board? Supervisor Arroyo.
So you have offices in the space that elections and DHHS also have offices in, right? That big complex
Yes, we do.
over on 6th Street. So I'm really interested in that. I know we had talked before about how you actually have too much space. And so I'm interested to hear that you're doing working to move forward with the remodel. Is there a vision for the rest of the space being used by other county departments? Is that the idea?
Right now, we're subleasing part of the space to economic development. And the plan is, and that's part of the building remodel, that economic development is going to be in that space full-time. It's going to be remodeled so they can, I believe, bring in more staff into that space. After that, we are still going to have some space available that we would like to sublease to another county department. I think Alicia's aware of that. I don't think there's been plans set in place yet. We've had a couple departments look at that space, but we definitely want to move forward with that. We don't need that space, and building costs are going to be huge for us going forward, as I said, with our budget pressures. So we hope to get down to a manageable space. We don't need it. I guess at one point, the child support department had over 100 staff members. We're down to 38 now.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Supervisor Bone.
Yeah, thanks for that question on the building, because I was the same thing, 500,000 for a remodel to downsize. So I'm sitting here doing the math, and and I know the elections has a large space also that they use, so I was just trying to figure out, is that a triple net lease, or is our lease going to change as we change, as we make the upgrades? If we're paying for the upgrades, is it a triple net lease, and where does it come out at the end? We're talking about subletting to other departments, and we're also talking about building buildings, and we want to do everything, but we don't have any money. But where you obviously, if we're looking at some of this stuff, we're going to be downsizing anyway, and you're operating with 38 compared to 100, and it's getting by. So and I think Lisa and her crew set you up. You got a pretty good team when you set up, and a lot of them. But you're running a very good. The old thing is, if we don't hear anything about you, it's a good thing. Yeah, we don't hear a lot about you. So, with that, are we shuffling, or will the landlord take anything back?
Yeah, I believe most of the costs are going to have to be borne by the departments. I can tell you from our perspective, we looked at it. We looked at possibly moving elsewhere because we don't need that space. And what we decided is long-term, we'd still like to be there, but there would need to be some modifications to the building and some of it, I think, is ADA things that are required that we're going to have to do if we start doing a remodel. And part of it is just to allow us to share the space with economic development and allow them to have a better space there. So I'm actually open to anything, but
It's kind of why I asked if it was triple net. I know there's been some ADA, but there's still a lot more to do, and I'm trying. Is that on us, or is that going to be on the landlord since we're making improvements to his building? It's all how we're writing these leases, I know.
Yeah, I think most of it's going to be on us. That's my understanding.
And then the other thing, you were asking, $10 million you've brought in for, child support, things like that and everything
Right.
else. Out of that 10 million, how much is outstanding? How much, if everybody had paid what they owed, what's still on the other side of the books?
Yeah, if everybody paid what they owed, we'd be looking closer to probably 18 million that we would collect. Typically, we're collecting about 66% of
okay.
what's owed for current support, which doesn't seem very high, and it's not, of course.
It's not a bad number for bad debt.
We-
66% is a good number for
Yeah,
bad debt.
we'd like to be higher, but it's about average of where everybody is. It's difficult to collect much more than that, especially with the economic conditions that we face in this area.
Okay, and then the other thing I imagine my esteemed colleague to the left will ask, but I'm sure we can find you space in Southern Humboldt if you're looking to go somewhere, so.
Absolutely, we'd love to get down there. We have staff that are very excited to do that.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, and reach out to me anytime. There's lots of ADA ready space.
Okay, great, thank you.
Supervisor Wilson.
Just a quick question. I mean, I think what I heard you say and what I understand is that you're not really, most of your funding's not general fund.
Yeah,
At
we don't
all.
get anything from the general fund.
Right.
Yes.
That's great from our perspective.
Yeah, and that's our goal, is to continue that.
Approved.
And I will say that, that space where we have these leases is flexible in this moment, but it does speak to our needs in a long-term perspective with relationship to the county. And just because we haven't had sort of the drive and the vision to get there in the past doesn't mean we shouldn't drive and have vision to get there in the future. And so I think it's something we'll have more discussions about. But I do appreciate the fact that when you think about the improvements you're going to need, you're talking about a potential, net zero cost over a 5-6 year period, which is, that's pretty good. So I appreciate that. And so, yeah, you guys are doing great. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I didn't include that chart, but it's substantial, the savings that we will have because we already know our rent's going to go up. They can raise our rent every 5%, I believe, every year. And so if we don't do this remodel and get into a smaller space, we're going to be paying an astronomical amount of rent for the employees that we have.
Great, thank you. You mentioned you've had some hiring success recently. Short form, what would you attribute that to?
I think it's a combination of things. We're trying to do a better job of recruiting and making sure people understand the type of work they're getting into when they come in. I think the increase in pay has helped. People have mentioned that. And, beyond that, I'm not sure. But there's been some short-term success. We've still had situations. We just hired somebody that left after 3 weeks, but luckily they left for a job with the county in another department, and so we're okay with that. But it's been a challenge, but we've had better success with hiring people recently.
Glad to hear it. Thank you for that. All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. And next,
Next, we have DA Stacy Eads.
great.
And I do not believe, Stacy, you have a PowerPoint, correct? No, I do. You do? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for having those in ahead of time. Appreciate that. Welcome. Either place. You can sit, stand, whatever.
Supervisor Madrone, is the public comment microphone?
Yes, now it is. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chair Madrone and the entire board for this opportunity to address the board regarding our budget for the fiscal year 23-24. In preparing for this afternoon's presentation, I was really trying to delve into what is it that we at the District Attorney's Office provide to the community. Obviously, it's not a particular product, but really when it comes down to it, it's justice and it's enhanced community safety for the public. So in doing that, it's imperative that we do so with compassion, competence, and commitment. The people of Humboldt County certainly deserve justice, and that needs to be done in a compassionate manner where we're compassionate about the rights of the victims of crime, to be informed, to be heard without unnecessarily delay, the rights of the accused to be treated fairly and equitably, the rights of the people to prosper and live without fear of harm to themselves or their loved ones or businesses by those who are choosing to commit crime. The competence of all staff members must meet the high standards. The District Attorney's Office and the District Attorney herself are held to the highest level of standards. So I really do have that expectation that the entire office reflects that. So in order to do that, we have to be well prepared and knowledgeable. And with this, we, as the district attorneys, the deputy district attorneys, the DA investigators, the DA victim witness advocates, can all provide for the community at the level that they deserve. And we're committed to serving and vigorously representing all people with integrity and respect. So that's what we provide. And looking at our estimated budget summary for the board's consideration, we have a number of funding sources. We certainly do have a significant portion that is from the general fund, but that's just shy of $3 million. We receive just shy of $1 million in grant funding that our office writes for, and a number of these are competitive grants. We also receive Measure Z funding and Measure O, Measure Z funding. And we receive funding from state aid programs that are connected to specific types of criminal prosecutions, as well as we do receive funds through other sources, including asset forfeiture funds. Now, many of these funds are kind of earmarked for specific purposes, as the court, or the, excuse me, as the board is aware. In terms of operations, the last fiscal year, we had 67 employees funded. For fiscal year 23-24, we are asking for 64 employees to be funded. During the course of the year of 2022 alone, we received 6,299 law enforcement referrals. So when I say law enforcement referrals, I'm talking about reports that come from law enforcement agencies, whether it's Eureka Police Department, Humboldt County Sheriff's Department, Rio Dell, agencies across all of Humboldt County. Some of those reports include multiple defendants, and most of those reports include multiple crimes. So more than 6,299 actual crimes are committed allegedly within the county of Humboldt. So all of those have to be processed by our office. The people that do this are various groups within our office. We have a very strong administrative team. Betty Resendez is currently our administrative service officer, who leads her team of folks that really keep the office running and process those 6,299 referrals within an annual year. We have a great team of district attorney investigators. These are seasoned investigators who we recruit from typically other agencies, so they come to us with a wealth of knowledge, both out on the streets as well as the laws that they need to enforce. We have a victim witness team. Nikki Miranda is leading our victim witness team. She's the program coordinator. We had some recent recruitments, and we have a really great, enthusiastic team of advocates serving the public. We have our deputy district attorney team. We have a number of individuals who have been here in Humboldt County and have really grown within the county and have acquired a high level of expertise and knowledge through the years, much of that under the work with my predecessor, Maggie Fleming. In terms of looking at our specific accomplishments over the course of the last year, we have continued with successful prosecution of homicides and other serious felony cases. We have filed over the year of 2022, 1,398 felony cases, 2,526 misdemeanors. In 2022, we took 18 cases to jury trial. 14 of those were serious felony matters, 4 misdemeanors, all of which were DUIs. All of these are crimes that put the public at risk. In 2023, we've already taken 13 cases to jury trial, and we also are including a sexually violent predator trial that recently concluded. In looking at the 2023 trials as well, I would just like to emphasize that we had a recent murder conviction as well as a recent stalking conviction. Both of those are very serious violent crimes. And the murder conviction, that was the first murder trial for the deputy DA that handled that case. So she's definitely a great example of an individual that's risen up. We have active right now, these are cases that are going to court regularly, either from the arraignment stage up through sentencing. So 587 active felony cases, a number of murders, child abuse, sexual assault crimes, burglaries, robberies, felony DUI, as well as crimes against the environment. An additional, we have well over 1,000 active misdemeanor cases. So again, these are cases that are regularly going to court. We have a lot of domestic violence. We have a vertical prosecution for domestic violence cases as well as sexual assault and child abuse cases. We have a team that's handling elder abuse cases. And we have a lot of work that we do with the School Attendance Review Board and school truancy cases. So we have a dedicated investigator who works regularly with the School Attendance Review Board and really has a lot of hands-on and knowledge of those families who are having challenges getting their children to school. Another accomplishment that we have that I'd like to emphasize is that we have a tribal diversion program that we've developed. We've really worked closely with the Yurok tribe. I believe it's next week, but we'll have a public signing of a MOU where we'll be adopting a tribal diversion program to help assist those individuals, tribal members that might find themselves in the state criminal court, and for certain appropriate candidates, allowing those individuals to seek services and guidance and supervision through the tribal court programs, and hopefully avoid a conviction within the state justice courts. Another accomplishment is the implementation of the leadership succession plan. So when District Attorney Maggie Fleming retired, I was able to move forward with over 20 years of experience as a prosecutor, move up from being the Assistant District Attorney to now the elected District Attorney. Additionally, in terms of leadership succession that we're really proud of as well is Joyce Moser, who worked with the Victim Witness Unit for over 40 years. She's really one of the founders of it. And she was able to have Nikki Miranda, who has a number of years, over 10 years of experience, did a lot of work with the grant writing within the office. So she's taking over, taking the lead with the Victim Witness Division. This last year, I was awarded the Outstanding Prosecutor of the Year for rural medium counties. I think it's a representation of the state's acknowledgement that here in Humboldt County, we've really focused on protecting vulnerable victims and populations. The prosecutor-initiated resentencing program is about a 3-year pilot program where we've had the opportunity to really look at our prison population and take a look to see, are there individuals within the prison system that were committed from Humboldt County who might at this point be deserving of some sort of modified sentence. So we've gotten to take a really close look at those individuals that are incarcerated, how Humboldt County over the years has treated criminal defendants. And frankly, what we've really been learning is that Humboldt County has been very fair, and over the years has really kind of naturally implemented a lot of the more recent laws in terms of who goes to prison and for how long. So that's really says a lot about Humboldt County and just sort of, you know, how we try to help folks. That's sort of generally kind of the first step. And so really the most violent and folks that just have no interest to change their behaviors are those that have ultimately found themselves in prison. But I'm continuing to look at potential applicants and candidates and see if we can find some that might meet the criteria, people that have been recipients of rehabilitative services and taken those opportunities during their time during incarceration. We've also engaged in a large amount of public outreach within the community, always seeking to educate regarding crime that occurs, prevention, reporting, what to do. We engage and participate in a lot of community educational awareness events, from Arts Alive to Take Back the Night and other programs, educating the community, getting some outreach, letting people know that we're there to provide services and what we can do and how to handle a situation if they're a victim of crime, as well as ideally to help prevent crime from happening in the first place with some education and awareness regarding some of the risks that we face. And we certainly do go to schools and try to educate and do outreach with the young people and help them understand what the district attorney's office does and resources that we can provide to them, their family, and hopefully inspire perhaps few to go into their area of work. In looking at the work that our district attorney victim witness division does, this chart outlines the number of victims that victim witness advocates have had contact with during the particular calendar years outlined. And this is for a first contact. So I think it's important to keep in mind that our advocates don't just say goodbye to an individual, you know, once their case is closed. These are oftentimes ongoing relationships that they build with the people that they serve. So it's pretty consistent during the number of years. You can see the impact that COVID had, and we're coming back out of that, moving up to the same number of people that we're serving. The CAST is the Child Abuse Services Team, so those are victims who might be, victims of child abuse or their family members, and are receiving services through our victim witness division. We provide services to a number of different ethnic groups throughout. We have provided services to American Indian, Black and African, Hispanic, Latino groups. I would say that, and the number of individuals as well who don't choose to report their ethnicity, about half of the victims' compensation services are being provided to those who identify white, non-Latino, Caucasian. The Victim Witness Office has been in service since 1982, so this is certainly a service provider that our community has benefited from for a number of years, and continues to receive services of compensation for losses, as well as support through the court proceedings. In 2022, 45 individuals were served who were homeless, so crimes against the homeless. 8 under the category of elder abuse, 101 for domestic violence. Looking at what impact the victim witness services has on the community, I think some of these testimonials really emphasize the difference that they can make. So it's not often that those of us within the criminal justice service system find ourselves people are happy and grateful, but when victims of crime are given the time and the compassion and the caring, it certainly helps them move forward with their lives and eventually, hopefully, find some degree of healing. And so these testimonials are from victims that have provided. So my advocate did a really great job helping me feel safe and comfortable enough to testify in court. She has such a sweet and calming presence, and I felt genuinely well cared for. Thank you for your guidance. I could not have done this on my own. Thank you so much. Your help has been immensely helpful and honestly aid to help me with moving forward in some ways. Thank you for going to court with me this morning. Your assistance throughout this matter has been greatly appreciated. And I think equally telling is some of the comments that our advocates themselves have to say about the work that they do within the office. And so this really is work that the board, the county, allows individuals that come in and work as advocates within the district attorney's office to have that opportunity. So one of our advocates said, "I love working as an advocate and wouldn't trade this experience for any other job." How often do you hear that about a county job? So it's pretty huge, I think. For me, yes, the nature of the job can be hard to hear the details of a person's victimization and the trauma that follows from it. But what I love about my job is that I get to help people and serve my community. I also love working with the amazing group of people in my office. Other advocates within our office shared experiences that they had for helping other victims within the community. One advocate spoke to providing a first-time expectant mom with some items for her baby that would soon be born. That particular victim had to flee from her home and she left with nothing. And the opportunity to assist all types of victims. One of our advocates, she shared the following. She said, "I get to give back to the community I was raised in. I've helped doctors, business owners, teachers, students, athletes, you name it. Crime does not discriminate. The district attorney's office approach to victim-involved cases coming on is a team approach between the prosecutor, investigator, law enforcement, makes victims trust the system more." So that's something that we do try to provide. Turning next to next accomplishment is the ongoing success of our child abuse services team. As the board's likely aware, the child abuse services team is a multidisciplinary team, so it's not just the district attorney's office by any means. We work closely with the Department of Health and Human Services. We also and they specifically do fund the child interview specialists who conduct the forensic interviews of children or developmentally delayed adults. The district attorney provides investigators, we provide the CAS coordinator, we provide the victim witness advocates, and we provide the deputy district attorneys that are all assigned to the team to handle these very special cases. In 2022, we hit the 100 forensic interview mark for our child abuse services team interviews. We were working towards that same level now in 2023. We're certainly back in business. After the pandemic, we saw such a decline in child abuse reports and investigations. And if it only were because children were not being abused, that would be a wonderful thing. But sadly, I don't think that was the case. And so we did see incidences where there was abuse during that period of time. They just weren't being reported because the mandatory reporters weren't getting the information that they needed to bring it forward to law enforcement. In terms of turning to the goals of the district attorney's office, the ongoing goal to enhance community safety by prosecution of crime in a fair and timely manner, always prioritizing violent crimes and those perpetrated against vulnerable victims, maintaining and expanding a highly competent team committed to serving with integrity, compassion, and respect. We seek to engage in community outreach, as we've done, education efforts designed to prevent and reduce crime, addressing elder abuse. We've seen, as we have formulated the EVAS team, the number of elder abuse cases that we're able to prosecute and that are reported, and working together with our community partners has definitely increased. And so that's something that is there's still room for improvement in terms of collaborating our efforts with one another in addressing elder abuse. Additionally, the fentanyl overdose deaths, really it's an epidemic. I think we're all fully aware of that, and it's something that we actively need to address. The last number that I heard from Sheriff Hansel was that, well, in 2022, I believe it was 70 overdose deaths from fentanyl, and in 2023, we've already hit 80 overdose deaths. So we can't just continue to stand by. I think that will take a community effort, and we need to collaborate in terms of preventing these continued deaths. So, and then another important goal of the District Attorney's Office is to protect local business with consistent accountability measures for repeat offenders. We need to collaborate with law enforcement and county information technology to complete our electronic report submission. In other words, to go paperless and not carry the paper files and have all our information in one resource, and also expand the utilization of our prosecutor by Carpel case management system. So this is kind of a multi-phase process where we do utilize the prosecutor by Carpel case management system, but there are a number of functions that we really can start putting into action. But we need the assistance of the county information technology IT department to make that happen. So we're really looking forward to working more closely with them and having that move forward. Additionally, we really need to collect and analyze demographic characteristics for those who are involved in our local criminal justice system, and take a look at who is entering the criminal justice system, not only as offenders and persons that allegations are being brought against, but also who's being victimized, and how can we intervene, and are we addressing those issues in a way that will help reduce crime, provide rehabilitative efforts, and enhance the public safety of the community as a whole. In looking at, I touched on it a little bit, the Elder and Vulnerable Adult Services Team, EVAST, much of that is funded through Measure Z, and we are extremely grateful for that opportunity to have that. And again, we've really, if you take a look at these over the years, cases involving elders, the difference in having the EVAS team and not having the EVAS team is really well represented in, if you look at the difference between 2016 and 2018, that marks the difference. We had a little bit of decline again working through COVID, but we're coming back up and working together. We have a number of grant support through the Office of Emergency Services, through Victim Witness Services, as well as Child Advocacy Center, Workers' Compensation Fraud, and the Auto Fraud programs. And we also receive compensation from the victim state funds. These funds, in looking at the years and the types of crimes, they don't necessarily represent when those crimes occurred. It just represents when the payout was made to the victim for the services. So for example, a victim of child abuse, if his or her offender is convicted, they may be ordered, and there may be a basis, even if they're not convicted, for that particular victim to receive compensation for counseling services, for example. And that could be over for a number of years, and it's not just limited to, by any means, to when the actual offense occurred. So these numbers don't necessarily represent what type of criminal conduct was occurring in that particular calendar year. And I wanted to take just a moment to address the importance of Measure Z funding to the District Attorney's Office, and that we are extremely reliant on that. And I just want to note that when the board did adopt Measure Z and subsequently Measure O, and when it passed within the community, that part of the language was to for public safety and essential services to the Humboldt County. The District Attorney's Office services the entire county of Humboldt. So that's an important factor to kind of emphasize. And then also to just note that when Measure O came forward, the board did acknowledge that through Measure Z, we were able to recover a number of deputy district attorney positions with the funding that came through Measure Z that had been previously frozen, as well as able to provide services like experts within our cases and witnesses so that we can achieve that high level that is really required, in particular to proving some of the more complex types of cases. So we are heavily reliant on that. And also within the body, an intent of Measure Z, Measure O was servicing and providing services for victims of child abuse. So I just want to raise that in terms of our appreciation of the board's ongoing acknowledgement of the importance of those funds to keep those positions well funded so that we can continue to do the work that we do for Humboldt County.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for giving me the chance to go through and meet your staff and get to know you a little bit more. One of the things that I have come to understand in the last few months, or at least talking with everyone has put a finer point on it, is that, and I by no means mean to say that your office should prosecute fewer cases, but I do understand that when you do prosecute cases, there's a ripple effect to other departments because there's an associated, cost within our whole justice network. And I'm wondering what mechanisms are in place without compromising case details to allow you to coordinate between other, parts of our justice system, like probation and the public defender and the courts, and to kind of, because I know that everyone's taxed, everyone's kind of short-staffed, and how do you kind of navigate the challenges around that?
Well, I think, first of all, I just have to say that whatever implication our prosecuting a crime might have on another county department just isn't part of the equation. Okay, so that's not how we find, public safety, and that's not how we find justice. So it's never a consideration. It's just like, I wouldn't take into consideration how it might impact the personal life of one of my deputy DAs if they need to take a case to trial. That's not something that we factor in. We certainly are open to creative ways to address criminal behavior and how to potentially address those behaviors so that they change and perhaps individuals don't come back into the criminal justice system through rehabilitation. And I think looking at the tribal diversion program, for example, that's a really great example of how there can be some degree of intervention and oversight, supervision, and rehabilitative efforts with the ultimate goal of helping that individual avoid a conviction within the criminal justice state courts, and also to receive services and perhaps get on a better track. So there are ways to address that, but I'm not going to just not prosecute crimes because it might have an impact on the county's other departments.
I should say that wasn't what I was suggesting per se. I was just wanting to understand how you coordinate about lower level offenses, and also like what other, I know you mentioned the tribal court diversion program and what other diversion programs exist, et cetera. And when I say like the resources, I also kind of mean the people resources, the capacity, and obviously I'm sure you're aware of how long it takes for everything to kind of move forward. So I was just wanting to understand how you utilize diversion and other alternatives.
Well, at this point in time, diversion is being utilized by the courts for a number of cases. So it's Penal Code Section 1001.95, which allows discretionary diversion for many misdemeanor offenses, and that can be done even over our objection. So I think But when we're filing cases, we are kind of doing, oftentimes a interest of justice analysis. So we're looking, is this an individual who's has a criminal history? Is this an individual that's harmed someone else directly? Is this an individual that's expressed remorse? Is this an individual that, perhaps, is having been arrested or whatever intervention the law enforcement agency might have utilized? Maybe that was enough, maybe that's where we can let this stand. And so, sometimes we will, pend a case for a period of time to see if there's any ongoing conduct. And if not, we might just be done with it in the interest of justice. So we do that. And it's not across the board, depending, it's really a case-by-case analysis.
Supervisor Boone.
Well, with all those cases, and there's only, well, I know there's more than that, but the 18 jury trials, it looks like there's a lot of diversion, a lot of collaboration going on. But can you go a little bit more on, we moved out of a private building and you took a obliterated space upstairs, the racquetball court, and turned it in, and it was quite expensive at the time. But in the long run, with the staff here, without them having to fight, 10 years here and Joyce complained, I can tell you, just, and nice choice again, I said it last week with Nikki, but has that, the savings just in staff time, being in the same basic area, I mean, basically a stairwell away and things like that, and then the space we were able to provide, there's going to be an extreme long-term savings on that eventually, I would imagine, right? And are you seeing more efficiencies through that?
Yes, and I think, it's really important that in terms of our ability to effectively serve victims and to investigate cases in particular. So upstairs, we have the district attorney, victim witness advocates, as well as the child abuse services team. So those two, divisions, if you will, are located on the 5th floor there. So we have an increased, we're able to work more closely as a team, I would say, because we are physically located much closer. And so there was a time, where I might not have even been aware of like who all was housed within the victim witness, division. And that's just no way to have it. So it's like, we do need to work very closely as a team. And so we're there, we might have a victim on the phone and it's like, oh, I need to bring the advocate into this, and they can zip right down and we're working on it together. And so we really do, we try to have our meetings whenever possible with crime victims or their family members as a team, so that those persons that are impacted by crime can meet their team at the district attorney's office. And so having the location there has really facilitated that. Moreover, I think in just having upgraded, nice facilities, when we do have victims of crime, they appreciate that they're being respected, right? And that they're appreciated and they are deserving of a good space to share their story and be supported and to move forward. There was a time, over with the child abuse services team, where it really felt difficult, frankly, just because of the surroundings, to build that relationship of trust, and that we're professionals here to help you, because it really wasn't a professional setting.
No, and I don't know if everybody saw the old site, but I'm sure everybody's seen the new site, which is great. And then when you talk about the demographics, the analyzation and things like that, is that also at the point where you address the frequent flyers? Because, these are the guys, and I know we see them every day in the paper, some of them. Every day. And that mainly they're for misdemeanors, but after a while, they turn into a little bit more with the time consumption and, just the time it takes to put them in and out of our correction system and the officers that have to do it. So I don't know what we do about that, but do you analyze that and saying this guy's costing us, or this gal or this person's costing us this much money because we're dealing with them 12 to 18 times a month in the system, and then that's 12 or 18 systems that you're going to have to get and read, and you're going to go, oh, it's
Right. So I think that would be part of it in terms of allowing us to focus on, and is it just the names that we're familiar with, or are there others perhaps, right? And also the part of the design behind that is to look at what populations and what groups, and are we treating everyone fairly? Is there any disparity? And also in terms of also not just for offenders, but also make sure that everyone's being treated fairly and equally, but also who's being victimized. I think it's, the state has really, they've kind of mandated some, resource, obligations to report in terms of who's being prosecuted. But I think we also, need to look at who's being victimized.
Okay. Thank you.
Our system just crashed. We need to stop the meeting, take a break, and I need to restart everything.
Okay, we're going to thank you very much, Stacy, appreciate it, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. We'll see how long it takes. Back in about 10. Next presenter is?
Next up, we have
Excuse me?
your.
I'm
Oh, I'm
sorry,
sorry.
but I don't know if we finished with Stacy. I had comments. Did anybody else have comments?
Stacy, could you please, DA Eads, could you please come back up?
Most certainly.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank you for the presentation and to tell you that I hear really great things coming from the victim witness program. And oftentimes victims really feel at fault and carry a lot of blame. And so that comfortable area for them is so important. And the work that happens there is so important. I also wanted to ask, with caseloads, I know your office has a heavy caseloads as well, and how is your staff feeling? I guess I wanted to ask as far as that goes.
So I would say in terms of that, well, first of all, thank you for your comments regarding the victim witness advocate team. In terms of the caseload, yes, we have a tremendous caseload, and I think it certainly is putting the entire office to the test. We have ongoing recruitment efforts, and the goal is to certainly recruit and then retain folks that have that same degree of, competence and compassion and commitment to serving Humboldt County. So I've recently had the opportunity to interview some very promising advocates. So I think that we'll certainly do well in the future, but it is an ongoing effort. We've had a number of retirements within the last year that certainly have impacted the office. But again, we have a real hardworking group, but they do need help.
Thank you for that. And again, thanks for the very thorough presentation.
Sure. And I also just wanted to address as well, just regarding the public defender offices in terms of caseload in those services that the district attorney's office provides, that we also handle cases that are being defended by private attorneys. So it's our caseload is frankly significantly greater because a number of those cases are also being handled by folks that are private attorneys within the community.
Great, thank you for that. Supervisor Wilson.
Well, because this is a budget hearing, and you did mention that you have 67 employees now and you anticipate 64 in the next budget. Can you want to give us a little update on that?
Certainly. The difference of 3 employees, there was some grant funding that we did not reapply for, in particular the underserved grant, because we didn't really feel that with the makeup of the service providers that we could meet the requirements of those particular grants. And that again was due to some of the retirements that we had within the office. Those positions are not currently, they're vacant.
That is all I have.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks so much, appreciate it.
And next.
All right, next we have your interim chief probation officer, Coral Sanders. And Coral also has a PowerPoint.
Welcome.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. My name is Coral Sanders, and I'm the Interim Chief Probation Officer. In this presentation, I'll provide an overview of the Probation Department's expenditures and revenue sources, some of the primary services we provide to the community, and some of the department's challenges, accomplishments, and goals. The Probation Department is submitting a $16.9 million budget. The primary expense is the department's staff, accounting for roughly 3/4 of the department's budget. The staff consists of 102 positions encompassing sworn staff in both probation officer and juvenile correctional officer classifications and non-sworn support staff. The cost of staff has been greater in the past year due to a high vacancy rate, particularly in the juvenile hall, which has necessitated both probation officers and JCOs to work overtime. Most overtime hours are worked in the juvenile hall. However, in the past year, there's been an unusual high need for officers to take shifts providing around-the-clock hospital guard duty. Hospital guard duty becomes a mandate when a youth in custody at the juvenile hall becomes hospitalized. The number of youth on probation has trended down statewide and has made our vacancy rate more manageable. The ability to leave some juvenile positions unfilled has also made the county's requirement to maintain a 10% vacancy rate of staff funded by the general fund a more manageable task. The remaining quarter of the budget is primarily expended on services and supplies, funding other programs and services which benefit those on probation supervision, direct client services, miscellaneous other charges such as internal service fees, and fixed assets. Programs and supportive services that probation contributes funding to include drug Medi-Cal payback, the Bridges to Success program, providing mental health support to youth through their schools, a mental health peer coach for youth in juvenile hall, teen court, the Boys and Girls Club, and the Arcata House Partnership. Direct client services are costs supplemented by probation that are necessary to help probationers overcome needs and build supports in their lives, such as the costs of batterers intervention programs, residential drug treatment, and transitional housing. The general fund accounts for 37% of the probation department's budget. Half the department's revenue comes from the state. The state funds include those associated with AB 109 prison realignment, the Youth Offender Block Grant and Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act monies, which support the New Horizons program and diversion activities for youth, Prop 172 funding for public safety, SB 823 money connected to the closure of the Department of Juvenile Justice and realignment of those services to counties, YFPG, which is a Juvenile Facilities Improvement Grant, STC money for mandated ongoing training for probation officers and JCOs, and money from SB 678, which incentivizes community corrections performance. SB 678 money has been used to support direct client services and to lower general fund obligations. A larger transfer of SB 678 funds and trust will be made this year to offset increases to wages, which will not be covered by the general fund. Transfers from trust will account for 4% of our budget in the coming year. Measure Z provides funding for 6 probation officer positions, accounting for 4% of the budget. DHHS pass-through money also accounts for 4% of the budget and supports adult drug court and juvenile wraparound services. Federal funds account for 1% of the budget and come from sources including a Cal OES grant for intensive supervision of domestic violence offenders, Title IV-E, and the nutrition program in the juvenile hall. Probation's primary areas of focus are the juvenile hall, planning for successful re-entry from the juvenile hall, jail, or prison, case management, and providing services to the court. Youth detained in the juvenile hall can be there on one of 3 tracks. Initially, youth who are booked into the juvenile hall may be going through the court process on new charges or a violation of probation or awaiting a court-ordered placement. Youth who have been adjudicated for their crimes may be committed to the New Horizons program, which is on average a 6-month in length treatment program. The third track is the Secure Youth Treatment Program. The SYTP was created to accommodate those youth who would previously have been committed to the Department of Juvenile Justice, but will now be kept local due to DJJ's planned closure on June 30th. These youth can serve up to 7 years in the hall and may be serving their sentence up to age 25. The closure of DJJ and the need to accommodate those youth locally will result in youth and transitional age adults serving longer sentences for more serious crimes in the juvenile hall and as such, the juvenile hall will need to accommodate older individuals than it has in the past. Regardless of which track they're on, youth in the juvenile hall are provided programming and services to meet their unique needs and goals. They have access to high school and college level education services, medical care, mental health and family counseling, substance use disorder treatment, cognitive behavioral therapies, enrichment programs, and vocational services. Consistent with the decline in youth being placed on probation, the average daily population in the juvenile hall has been relatively low. The low average daily population allowed us to assist our neighbors in Del Norte County by contracting to house their detained youth, thereby also increasing revenue for the juvenile hall at a rate of $150 per day per Del Norte youth. This partnership began in February, and we've had about 2 or 3 Del Norte youth in our care at any time since. Individuals under probation supervision may be re-entering the community from either the juvenile hall, the Humboldt County Correctional Facility, or state prison. In the past year, we've had 78 releases from the juvenile hall. Efforts are made while youth are in the hall to strengthen family supports and to make sure other supports, such as ongoing counseling services, are in place. Child-family team meetings are held throughout the youth's detention to formulate a re-entry plan utilizing family and community resources. In the past year, there have been 334 releases from jail of individuals placed on probation supervision and 348 releases to the supervised release program. For individuals placed on probation, a reentry officer meets with them prior to their release to assess for any acute needs they'll face upon their release, such as housing, drug treatment, or ongoing access to medications. This way, individuals leave custody with a plan to meet critical needs and are less likely to abscond or relapse upon their release. The supervised release program supervises individuals who have pending criminal charges, but who have been deemed low enough risk to release from custody. The focus with these individuals is to ensure that they return to court. There's a lower level of supervision and expectation since these individuals haven't yet been convicted of a crime. About 2/3 of the individuals leaving state prison are supervised by probation upon their release. There have been 92 individuals released from state prison to probation over the past year. A probation officer video conferences with them prior to their release to assess what their needs will be upon their release and to make sure the individual knows what will be expected of them. A resource we're able to offer uniquely to this population is placement at Next Step. The Next Step program is our collaboration with the Arcata House Partnership, in which they are placed in a shelter set aside specifically for this population, where all their basic needs are met in exchange for them working toward goals such as employment, which will bring them closer to being self-sufficient. For those who would otherwise be homeless, this housing first approach allows them to focus on goals that would be outside their capabilities if they were consumed with figuring out from day to day how to meet their basic needs. The overarching goal for probation is to increase community safety. We achieve this by utilizing a case management style that focuses on addressing needs such as addiction, which once addressed will reduce the individual's likelihood to commit crimes. Likewise, helping offenders build protective factors such as pro-social peer relationships will reduce the likelihood of recidivism. It is also critical that we assess an offender's level of risk to the community and the likelihood that risk would be mitigated by resources offered to the offender while on supervision, as well as assessing the offender's amenability to services. In instances where the risk to the community is greater or the offender's amenability to services is less, case management may focus more heavily on accountability. Field contacts, sporadic searches, and drug testing are ways we use more of an enforcement approach to provide accountability and to identify when revoking or modifying conditions of probation may be necessary to maintain community safety. In the past year, probation officers have supervised approximately 1,900 adult offenders and 97 youth. The intensity of supervision is based on their risk to reoffend and their needs. Officers have completed over 2,200 risk and needs assessments and have conducted almost 2,000 field contacts. 2 or 3 efforts are typically made for every one successful effort at locating an offender in the field, so the number of attempted field contacts is actually significantly higher. This slide also demonstrates that while the number of youth on supervision is still historically low, Law enforcement referrals on youth are increasing from their pandemic lows. Also shown here is that the number of people who successfully complete probation is notably higher than the number who violate probation and ultimately get sentenced to prison. The probation department works closely with the courts. We enforce court-ordered conditions of probation and report back to the court when an offender has violated those conditions. We write investigative reports and provide recommendations, and we provide a community service work program, which the courts can refer offenders to as a form of restorative justice. There are more than 40 local nonprofit organizations that benefit from offenders being placed with them to perform their community service work. In the past year, we have filed 917 pretrial release reports, providing risk assessment scores and recommendations about whether to release individuals who were in custody on pending charges. We conducted 1,445 investigations, resulting in reports for the courts pertaining to sentencings for already convicted offenders. These reports contain a plethora of information, including statements from victims and information about the offender's social history and amenability. The most prominent challenges currently facing the probation department are the staffing shortage and being displaced from our main probation office, which is still pending reconstruction after being gutted by a fire over a year ago. During the first 9 months of the current fiscal year, probation officers worked 1,607 hours of overtime, and JCOs worked 2,340 hours of overtime. The majority of these hours were to cover minimal staffing levels in the juvenile hall. These numbers don't reflect the extensive number of hours probation officers worked in the juvenile hall, not as overtime, but in lieu of their regular positions. JCOs were mandated to work at least one overtime shift per week. Probation officers technically take overtime shifts on a voluntary basis, though sometimes there are social pressures to do so, such as when one of their peers in the juvenile hall's ability to take benefit time depends on getting their shift covered. The cost of these overtime hours and the staff shortage underlying the need for the overtime exceeds the fiscal implications. Time spent away from one's regular job to provide minimal staffing in another area of the department results in a reduction of overall services being provided. Also important is that JCOs and probation officers need to take care of themselves. To be ready to face work conditions which can quickly turn dangerous and which are well known for causing burnout and vicarious trauma. The probation department is blessed with staff who care for the youth and the adults we supervise and who will go above and beyond to ensure our department is providing a good service. But this can be at the cost of their own mental and physical well-being. If the department isn't able to provide an environment that supports self-care rather than asking staff to work at a rate that can be expected to cause burnout, we create a vicious cycle where employee retention becomes more strained, thereby exacerbating the low staffing levels. Recruiting and retention is a struggle for corrections statewide, and in the coming year, the department will be putting energy into identifying ways to make some ground in these areas. Admin support and probation officer positions are currently at a lower vacancy rate than they have been for most of the fiscal year, but the JCO vacancies continue to be at a crisis level. Probation's main building continues to be gutted down to the studs in most areas of the building. Public Works has dedicated numerous hours to the project, both working to determine what the insurance contribution will be to the reconstruction and working with an architectural firm to finalize design plans. It's anticipated the project will go out to bid shortly, with a possibility of construction beginning in the fall. There's hope the construction phase will be complete prior to the end of the coming fiscal year, though we are advised it may not be done until the fall of 2024. This ongoing construction project creates challenges to staff morale and to the budget. Staff in the Juvenile Probation Division are working in makeshift cubicles in the regional facility, which was built to be a detention facility. They have been working in these conditions for about 3 years, having initially been told these temporary accommodations would be for about 1 year. These conditions exacerbate the fatigue and burnout that people are already experiencing as a result of being understaffed. These circumstances also will also lead to the department's biggest budget unknown in the coming year. We don't have a solid idea of what the construction costs will be and to what extent they might exceed the insurance payout, which is expected to be about $2 million. There will also be added costs to make ADA upgrades. Another unknown is the cost of moving. In addition to the physical moving costs or moving expenses will include replacing damaged furniture. Despite the challenges, the year hasn't all been about doom and gloom. The Juvenile Hall has experienced some exciting accomplishments this past year with the implementation of a mindfulness program and virtual reality headsets. Youth are invited to participate in 2 mindfulness circles each day where they practice techniques such as breathing and stretching. The virtual reality headsets provide an exciting opportunity to expand access to vocational training. There are over 200 career exploration models which can be accessed, such as how to do an oil change on a vehicle. Juvenile probation has been expanding diversion efforts to help youth get on the right path prior to ending up on probation. One way they have achieved this is by facilitating parent project classes. In partnership with the Eureka Police Department School Resource Officer and an Arcata Police Department Diversion Officer, probation is currently providing a parent project course at Zane Middle School. Special efforts have been made to provide dinner and childcare to reduce barriers that might otherwise prevent parents of at-risk teens from coming to the class to learn brief interventions they can utilize at home. This class also provides a space for parents to develop a support network. Another effort that is about to come to fruition is to create an entirely mobile workforce within the department. We are on track to replace all staff's desktop computers with mobile workstations. This, combined with having docking stations and spaces connected to the Juvenile Hall's generator and having obtained a number of mobile hotspots, has us well positioned to be able to more flexibly meet court mandates in the face of natural disasters or other similar challenges. Looking forward to the year ahead, the goals that will have the biggest impact on the well-being of the department, both in terms of being able to care for our employees and being able to provide the best service to the community, the best services to support community safety, are moving back into our building and gaining ground on our staffing issues. Shorter-term goals that are already underway and which we are excited to see come to fruition in the coming year include construction of a greenhouse where we will be able to have a hydroponics program for youth in the hall. They will learn about hydroponic gardening while growing their own food. We will also be piloting a program in adult probation for body-worn cameras to be utilized by armed officers while conducting field work. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Supervisor Bone.
And I always wonder about this, and I'll look up Mr. Miles too, Council Miles. The moving costs and the out of the new building costs and everything else, are we not, isn't that covered under the insurance for the fire, or is this completely a different thing since we've
There is an expectation that there's about $2 million of insurance money for the fire. Some of the ADA upgrades are fairly expensive, and because they weren't present in the building prior to the fire, I believe is the reason why they won't necessarily be covered.
And they were scheduled to be done anyway through our ADA coordinator, I'm sure. So take the ADA out of there. Okay. I'm just wondering, the moving and the rental of a new location, and you keep saying there's a expectation of $2 million, and if that's not going to cover our costs, what was the project bonded for, and what were the insurance costs? Because if they exceeded $2 million worth of damages, then it seems like we should get an excess of $2 million. I'm getting lost on it. Just we went through this on a couple projects lately where we're not getting everything back, and I'm just trying to figure out how many yellow dots are left in the new juvenile hall too that haven't been fixed. But it's just a question.
I don't have the specifics with regard to the insurance coverage for that project right now. I think that is something that we can discuss during a meeting potentially with myself and Public Works staff.
That'd be great, because we asked this a while ago when we were going through this with the juvenile hall. Why weren't we covered? And I just completely, and I'm just saying we should probably make sure that we're covered on this, because what we're doing is covering somebody else's failings and moving our staff, and sounds like they're on the edge of jumping off the building, and just, because through no fault of our own, and an implied, and they've already accepted the liability. So they should incur the costs with the liability, 100% of them. So, except the ADA, I understand that, but that was already in the most of that was already in the ADA realm. We can't escape that anyway. That's all been, we've got $45 million into that already. I'm sure we're going to budget some more, so thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bone, and please let your staff know how much we appreciate their hard work. It's hard when you're understaffed and everybody's having to shuffle that way, but
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wilson.
I was just going to say, if you're going to be doing hydroponics, consider aquaponics, since we have that industry here as well. So, thanks.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next,
All right, Chair Madrone. Next, we have up your elected clerk recorder in Elections Office, Juan Pablo Cervantes, and it looks like Ben Hirschberger is going to join him as well.
great, 2 for 1. 2 for 2 for.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Madrone, members of the board. With me today, I have our fiscal officer in both the clerk recorder and registrar's office. I wanted to start with a quote that's been on my mind. I know that's a little different, but I'm a little different. The way law stays alive is by remaining in touch with social contracts pieced together among real people on the ground. And as I was working on this, that kept coming up on my mind. I'm going to start by giving a little background on the clerk recorder's office for those of you that are new to the board. The clerk recorder's office is the official repository for all documents and maps relating to land in Humboldt County. Recording of documents affecting land in Humboldt County accomplishes the mandate to impart constructive notice of any action affecting title to real property. So once a document is recorded, it becomes part of the official record of the county. Our revenues are generated through the collection of recording fees mandated by state law and the sale of copies of documents. We're also the repository for vital records for events that occur in Humboldt County. So that's births, deaths, and marriages. We provide a variety of different services, including issuing marriage licenses, performing civil marriage ceremonies, filing various registrations and notices, and administering oaths. Some of our achievements this past fiscal year include developing of web services so as to increase how far county resources go in the county. We have our indexes online from 1979 to present, so anyone who is interested in doing research no longer has to come into our office to do that research. They can do that 24/7 from the comfort of their home. They can also purchase and self-print any non-certified copies of documents, going as far back as 1999. We have recreated an online index enabling people to search the County California Environmental Quality Act filings and postings so that it's available online now. And our self-service web portal also allows couples applying for a marriage license to start the process in advance. One of the things that we're most proud of is our implementation of e-recording, which has increased accessibility and efficiency in our office. That's created a whole new pipeline. One of the bottlenecks used to be just getting into our office and recording documents, and e-recording has done a lot in terms of alleviating that. In the upcoming year, we're in the process of implementing a restrictive covenant program as required by AB 1466. This requires us to redact unlawful information in documents that make reference to race, religion, sex, gender, and other protected classes. We're doing that in coordination with the County ADA Compliance Officer, Karen Clower, and County Council. We've also been working on a storage facility that we've secured on the 5th floor, which will increase security and environmental protections for the records that we've been entrusted with. One of the big things in the clerk recorder side that is of note for the work you're about to do in putting together this budget is a dramatic drop in recordings in the past fiscal year. we saw a drop of about 32% in recordings, which is a sizable amount of the revenue that powers our offices. We're in the red this fiscal year. We have special funds that allow us to maintain services at the levels that we have. We'll be able to do that going forward through this rough patch. But one of the things that we've done historically is been a revenue generator for the county, and that's not something we'll be able to do this fiscal year, and it's not something I imagine we'll be able to do in the fiscal year after that. And so the single additional funding requests that we're making for this office in this fiscal year is to account for that lack of support we're offering the general fund this time around. Historically, we've, I believe last year we contributed $600,000. We were budgeted for contributing $200,000, and so it's not an insignificant amount of revenue that will need to be found elsewhere. We'll be able to fund the clerk recorder's office and fill the operating missing revenue with a special fund that we have in the office that we could only use specifically for the operation of the office. On to elections. Would you like to ask questions between departments? I'm in the unique position of speaking on behalf of two.
Let's go ahead and just provide the whole presentation.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'll be a little briefer on elections. Elections are an office that I think most of you all are familiar with, directly even. The main function for elections is maintaining the voter rolls and conducting countywide, state, federal, local, and district elections in accordance with federal and state laws. We oversee candidate filing, and we're the filing officer for statements of economic interest and campaign finance documents. We assist special and school districts with district governing board vacancies, appointments, and elections. The county recently saw some of our work with special districts in southern Humboldt, where the Garberville Fire Protection District saw the approval of an annexation, and Salmon Creek Fire Protection District was formed. Some of the accomplishments that we've had for the 2022-2023 fiscal year include conducting the 2022 statewide general election. At the time, we had over 84,000 actively registered voters, of which over 48,000 cast a ballot in that election, so just a little over 57%. Of those voters that cast a ballot, 88% of them did so by mail. We've gone from about 66% of voters voting by mail to 88% voting by mail since the passage of AB 37, which made all California voters permanent vote-by-mail voters. In the upcoming fiscal year, we're seeing a lot of changes in our office. We've begun transitioning to a new system for the Fair Political Practices Commission reporting, which should streamline and make that process easier for those folks that file 700s with us. Many of you know that process can be really difficult and arduous. The plan is eventually to expand that to other FPPC documents, like campaign finance documents. We have the 2024 presidential election cycle beginning. The March primary is in this upcoming fiscal year. It's a party primary, so we're facing multiple ballot types depending on what party you're registered with. We have central committees on the ballot, so it is one of our more complicated elections to run. Beyond that, even though the general election in November isn't in that fiscal year, we face a lot of costs and preparation associated with that election. To add some complexity to those challenges, ranked choice voting is coming to the city of Eureka. That'll happen in the upcoming election. there's a lot to that process that's going to be new to the voters in Humboldt County, and so we're engaging with that jurisdiction and making sure that outreach is at the forefront of what they're doing. We want to make sure that this new process is successful and that it doesn't disenfranchise anybody going through that process. Added costs associated with that are going to be borne by that jurisdiction, so that isn't necessarily a financial implication for the county, but you know, staff needs to kind of get trained and up to date on those processes, and those are costs borne by the county. The Voters' Choice Act is the other big change that's happening in the county of Humboldt. We're moving towards this process for a myriad of reasons, the primary one being a lack of ADA facilities in the county. We don't necessarily abide by the ADA restriction or the ADA requirements from when a building was built, but with current ones. And so we're constantly working with the ADA coordinator, Karen Clower, to update our ADA requirements. We've gotten to a point in Humboldt County where every polling place that we have has mitigation measures in place, and those are going to soon become financially unbearable. They're just going to keep increasing in cost and what we need to do in order to meet those federally regulated requirements. The other big reason we're making this shift is an increased difficulty with poll workers. We just had a grand jury report that spoke a little to this particular issue, where we had a hard time getting poll workers to attend all required trainings, and frankly, it's a matter of not having enough folks to make that a meaningful requirement. We need people, and we don't have them. The transition to vote centers will allow us to professionalize Election Day to where we're hiring extra help employees to administer it, and that process will ensure a little more accountability and a little different structure in terms of who we're recruiting to be working on Election Day. The additional funding requests that we have in the elections office are primarily tied with that change, and the fact that that there are additional costs associated with that, but that some of these additional costs are still unknown to us. So I'm asking for enough money to make sure that we implement it well, with the idea that I'll save costs wherever I can, but it'll be more difficult for me to come back to you all in the middle of an election if I need more. We're in the process of that becoming VCA. A lot of that has to do with a lot of that process has to do with stakeholder engagement. We're looking to meet with folks across the county and to get input in implementing this in a way that works for the county of Humboldt. One of the things I'd like to do now that I'm ending before I take questions is I want to thank CAO Hayes and our liaison, Karen Clower, and the ad hoc budget committee for guiding us through this process. This is my first time, in this role and going through this process, and it is a very difficult and complicated and technical process for a department. I can't imagine what that's like to coordinate. And so I'd like to thank you for that. Working with the ad hoc committee, they were able to work with me and find alternative solutions, understanding that there are great needs, but that the county doesn't have enough money to necessarily meet everything perfectly. And so we were able to adopt a couple of options in terms of our additional funding request in elections. One for $190,000 or so, and one for $154,000 or so. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions from the board? Supervisor Wilson.
Well, I appreciate the specifics on the requests here, so that's good and informative, and I'm just really glad we're not a county moving towards hand counting, because I'm hearing some very disturbing budget issues around that. So thanks for helping keep us on course with relationship to that.
Thank you. Yeah, that would be a funding request I don't think you all could afford at this time.
Supervisor Bone.
We do have one county off the rails. Voters' Choice Act.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little shy of half the state has voted to go to Voters' Choice Act. And when they did the first initial in 16, 17?
Yeah, 16, yeah.
Yeah, 16. When they did the first of 6 counties, I really, really wanted us to be one of those 6, but the person in your chair really, really didn't want us to be part of that 6. So now, I mean, it gives so many more options to so many people, and it saves us so much, and it allows us so much. And right now, we're spending a lot of money, time, effort for 12% of the people that just don't want to send their ballots in. So I'm just saying, this education, how long before we actually get into Voters' Choice Act full-blooded?
The plan thus far is to be a Voters' Choice Act county going into the March election. So the next county-wide election should be a Voters' Choice Act county, and I couldn't agree with you more. We've tried, since my time with elections, we've tried 3 times to become a VCA county. COVID hit us. We had a special recall election that hit us. We had big staffing changes that hit us, but I think we're well positioned now to make that transition. One of the areas that I think will benefit the most for me is there are these things called mail ballot districts or mail ballot precincts. I don't know if you're all familiar with those, but they are geographical groups of voters that that we don't have the ability to offer them a polling place other than in our office in Eureka. And you'll find those everywhere. They're not just in the 2nd and 1st district. You'll see them in
No.
You'll see them in the
Yeah.
4th district. You'll see them in the 3rd district. We have mail ballot precincts in Arcata. And one of the complaints that we get the most going through elections, other than how long it takes to certify an election, is that people feel disenfranchised by that process, that where you live shouldn't take away that kind of access to the polls. And I believe this alleviates that. This gets rid of mail ballot precincts entirely, because anybody can go to any polling place at any time. Not at any time within,
And
election
we have to
days.
have, you have to have one polling place for every 15,000 voters or 15,000 people?
There's different types. So there's 4-day voting places and 11-day voting places. And we'll be at about 10 to 11 polling places or vote centers in the new process.
Did I miss, are we going to the 4-day or I thought it was 10-day, but 11-day? Which one are we going to do?
It's 10 additional days, so it's 11 days altogether, including election day. And so 2 facilities are going to have to be 11-day, and the rest of those facilities will be 4 days. We're planning on having a couple of pop-ups just to make sure that we capture some, we're remote. Y'all know that, and so we want to make sure we have a pop-up in Hoopa and a pop-up in Garberville. So those will be 1-day polling places that we're doing beyond what we're required to do.
Great.
Supervisor Arroyo.
Thank you, and it was great to also get a chance to meet you in more depth in your role and kind of get to know you both. So I wanted to make sure I'm clear. So we have our beautifully named ARGFAs, our additional request for general fund appropriations here. And you mentioned 2 amounts. You mentioned the about $192,000 for implementation of the Voters' Choice Act, but then I want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. So you mentioned a different amount than I think what I'm seeing here. So I have an additional funding request in here about related to the clerk recorder functions of $300,000. Is that what you were mentioning?
So there's 2 pieces. So there's 2 different departments. It's easiest for me to think of them in completely isolated, separate things, just due to the types of funding and the sources.
Sure.
You can't really transfer stuff back and forth. And so the $300,000 request is clerk recorder, and it's just associated with our inability to provide any funds to the general fund. On the election side, we worked with the ad hoc committee to craft 2 options. The option that we'd prefer is, currently our structure is such, there's a little confusion with how many positions were allocated to the office. Currently, our allocation stands at 1 manager that's vacant, 3 analysts, and 2 election specialists. Election specialists are my frontline elections folks. If you're coming into my office, you're speaking to a specialist. That's thin. That's thinner than it's been since I've been there. And my initial request was to get an additional allocation of an election specialist to have 3. 2 is doable if nobody takes any time off and nobody gets sick. But as soon as those enter into the equation, it starts to get really dicey. The optional solution that we found in order to work through this budget shortfall is to, instead of having that 1 full-time equivalent election specialist that's going to be career, to bring extra help in to backfill that area, and to do so at a 0.75 FTE extra help rate.
So that's not featured on our list here. So that was the lesser number that you mentioned, like it was like 150 or something like that.
154,000.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can get you that figure.
That's
like
fine.
I said, navigating a new process.
Yeah, all good. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something in the mix. So thank you for clarifying.
Supervisor Bone?
You confused me, and I'm the simple one up here. You're asking for $300,000 because your funding is going to be so down and you can't give us $400,000 like you've always put into the general fund. Is that? I
was a little confused by that as well.
And so I'm sitting here, and everything you're doing is supposed to be cost savings. Recordings are down 32%. They're going to be down because we lost a couple more contractors this week who are leaving the area. So we're not building anything, and John can, and so unless it's government structures. So I mean, the recordings are gonna be down. So I don't know where we're gonna add to if we're going the other way, and that's just to be.
Yeah, I can speak to the 300,000. It's general fund impact that the clerk recorder's office will not be contributing 300,000 to the general fund as they typically would. So that 300,000 basically is reflective of what it would take to keep the clerk recorder's office in sort of a status quo position with their typical contribution to the general fund. Because it is a little out of the ordinary. We don't have a lot of departments that contribute to the general fund, but we felt like it was important for the board as a whole to see the overall impacts of what the current downturn is on the general fund. And not contributing $300,000 is significant.
The clerk recorder's office doesn't receive any dollars from the general fund.
Understood.
Yeah.
And the other one that Juan, correct me if I'm wrong, the 154,000, it's not reflected on the additional funding request because he was able to do some shifting internally to close that shortfall gap. Is that a correct?
That's not as I understood it.
No, he still wants it.
Yes. Yeah. As I understood it,
We can tell him to close the short gap any way he can, and he will do it, but.
Yeah. As I understood it is I had, I'm sorry, please.
Hang on, I've got a queue going with Arroyo and then Bushnell. Go ahead and finish your statement.
As I understood it, we were presenting 2 additional funding request options to the board. One for the 190,000 where I receive the full allocation I think I need. Going into the next fiscal year and beyond, really. And option 2, which is the 154,000, which will get me an extra help employee. The reason why I still want 1 instead of 2, even though I can get by with 2, is that that looking at it from a long-term perspective, it takes a lot of time to train these folks up. Elections are really unique things, and they change drastically. And it's a lot of resources that gets put into an employee, and to potentially have them leave after an election it's a loss in and of itself.
Okay, great. Supervisor Arroyo and then Supervisor Bushnell.
I recall you mentioning that full implementation of the Voters' Choice Act would potentially make us eligible for other funding streams. Could you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, we've already seen some of it. I'm about to engage in an outreach campaign with $25,000 in grant dollars that we received from the Secretary of State. And so the Secretary of State's been pushing for the Voters' Choice Act since 2016, like Supervisor Bone was mentioning. Those incentives spiked up around 2020, and they're starting to lessen. And so it's definitely a situation in which the legislature is pushing for the Voters' Choice Act. We could either get on the bus or get hit by the bus. I think we'll inevitably get there. At this point, as those grant dollars present themselves, I'll be able to seek them out and get them. If we don't, we won't seek those grant dollars out, and they might be less when we do decide to go in that direction.
Supervisor Bushnell.
Thank you, through the chair. So at the last, the reason there are the two options is that through the ad hoc, we identified the requests weren't tied to holding for layoffs. And so Juan and Ben and I and Karen and Jessica thought, bringing two options forward for the board's consideration was something that maybe the board would like to see. And Supervisor Arroyo was on her way home from the WIND conference in Sacramento that day. And so that's why you're seeing these two options. It was something that we talked about in length that day, which I really appreciated, just because our budget is so tight right now.
Great. Thank you all for the clarifications. Okay, and thank you. Appreciate both. And did you have something more to add? Or?
Oh, no, just if you had any questions on any of the figures that we came up with.
No, I think that was great getting that clarification. Thank you. Oh, Supervisor Bone.
We used to have the elected position and two managers. Now, have you changed that format so we don't have a manager for each department? And then, because I always thought that's what you got elected for, was to run those. That's why we joined them together. Should they, this in the future, should they be separated so we don't need two managers and an elected person?
So currently I've been running the show with an interim manager in the clerk recorder's office and no manager in elections. I'm looking to fill those positions as soon as I can. I don't see a world in which we'd find any cost savings in separating those two offices. There's a lot of compelling reasons to keep them together. About half of counties have a similar setup than we do, so we're not unique in our current structure. But I'm definitely looking to fill those positions, and the clerk recorder manager position's currently in the recruitment process, and I figured I'd save the county some dollars this fiscal or the end of the fiscal year, this quarter, by leaving the elections position vacant and just doing the work myself.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
I do have an addition to that.
Please.
Part of what you don't.
You gotta turn your microphone on or they won't hear you.
The little button on the wand. Yeah.
Sorry. So in addition to that, some of the things you don't see from having the two different departments is during an election, there's oftentimes that a lot of the recorder side will come over to elections and help with opening the ballots, doing some of the work that needs to get done to make the elections happen. When we do that, we try to coordinate it, we try to set it up so that there is a blackout time where you can't take vacation that time because we're all geared up to do the election. So that's some of the stuff you don't see, how the two departments are actually crossing over.
Great.
I don't recall an election that Karen Clower has not worked. So thanks to Karen. We depend on those county employees stepping in, and we're a small department, especially compared to some other counties, but the folks we get make it happen.
Great. Okay. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. And next.
All right, moving right along. Next, we have Planning and Building, and Director Ford is here to present. And did you have a PowerPoint, Director Ford?
I do. I'm going to do it through Zoom.
Okay, perfect.
Good afternoon.
afternoon, Chairman Drone and members of the Board of Supervisors, John Ford, to represent the Planning and Building Department's budget for 23-24. Before we start, I do want to say thank you to Alicia Hayes, the CAO, and her department for working with Planning and Building and being extremely patient with us as we've gone through this very, very difficult time. Nikki, are you able to show that? There it is. Apologize for that. There you go. So the Planning and Building Department has a total budget of $10,490,000. Currently, the staff allocated to the department is 84 positions. 12 of those are unfilled. We're proposing to do away with those unfilled positions in this new budget, so that would propose 72 positions as part of the 23-24 budget. The key asks that we have within this budget are for a program manager. The purpose of the program manager will be to take over managing grants and managing the housing program, both of which need direct attention. We also need to replace the GIS server, and also are asking to fund staff with shortfalls within the revenue of the budget. Part of the perfect storm that has hit this department at this time is that we find that our revenue has gone down significantly. Some of that has to do with within the last 3 months, the three years worth of accounting years budgets have been closed. We found that while we thought we were closing equal in those years, we're finding out that we were not. Particularly 2021 was a devastating year, and what that has done is really depleted the trust funds that we've used in the past to rely upon, that if we were a little bit over, it would be okay because we had a buffer there. This year we're finding there is absolutely no buffer. We also currently have a $1.4 million account receivable balance where applicants have not paid us for work that we've done. And while there is some money trickling in, I think we've received $200,000 this year. It is still a significant amount of money, leaving not only the trust funds empty, but also making it difficult to project what's going to happen going forward. Then we're also seeing an overall decline in income. With respect to our cannabis applications, those are remaining pretty constant because there's a backlog of those that we're working on. But current planning is generally trajecting down, as is building. The department is made up currently of 5 budget units. There's 262, which is building, and that includes both the building inspection, that includes plan checks, and that also includes the permit team at the front counter. Budget Unit 269 is code enforcement. They do both enforcement of what we call traditional cases and cannabis cases. 268 is cannabis, and we are proposing as part of this budget year to merge that with 277, primarily because most of the work that's done in cannabis is related to either discretionary projects or the front counter work or post-approval monitoring, and current planning and the cannabis applications have exactly the same functions. So it doesn't make sense to try to separate staff to do functions that are essentially the same. And then our last budget unit, then there's 277, which is current planning, and our last budget unit is 282, advanced planning or long-range planning, which works on all of the policy preparation, policy document preparation, ordinance preparation, also has been responsible for the housing programs and also the grant programs. So I want to go through each of the budget units and really briefly talk about their accomplishments, their goals, and then the budget implications for each one. Some of the accomplishments for the building division has been, they've been working hard to be able to, at the first of this year, the new fiscal year in 2023, which is July 1, to start being able to take applications in electronically. The holdup to that has been the inability to take online payments. We believe we've got a solution to that. So as of July 1, we will be accepting applications completely electronically. We're working to go to complete electronic submittals and ultimately require those. That'll do a couple different things that will ultimately save paper and space. One, we won't be making copies of everything. We won't be having to send out paper copies of things. It'll all be done electronically. The other thing that 262 has done, which really is an unfunded mandate, is to do substandard housing inspections. When we receive complaints about the content and quality of housing, it is the building inspectors to go out and look at that. And that is somewhat of the enforcement arm of that is code enforcement, but the building inspectors do the heavy lifting there. The ordinance has been changed to assign the chief building official the ability to determine a house whether or not it's substandard. They also issue about 120 stop work orders, and those are things when we get complaints about things going on, the inspectors go out, stop the work. And I bring those two up primarily because those are unfunded work that get done within the department. And so while our budget numbers look bad, there's a lot of work that these people do that we don't get direct payment for and don't have the ability to recoup our cost. The other thing that I believe someday there will be a recouping of costs, but I think the team did extraordinarily well, which is the Rio Del earthquake response when they stopped everything else they were doing and went down and helped the people in Rio Del. I wanted to bring up a little bit of permit numbers. These are the last 3 years, 2020, 2021, and 2022. You can see the new single-family residences. The numbers are declining, but they're not all that significant. It's not a precipitous drop-off. The good news is the ADU program is showing success, and we are seeing more accessory dwelling units being proposed. The lion's share of the work really is in residential additions. The new commercial numbers are dropping off overall, and the remodel to commercial structures is remaining the same, and then permits related to mobile homes remains kind of constant. This doesn't completely explain why the revenues are going down, other than perhaps looking at the fact that new commercial is down and new single-family residences are down slightly, and the value of a structure is what a permit fee is based upon. So when more expensive structures aren't being built, that reduces the revenue to the building division. The goals for the building division in 23-24 is that we are currently, with a grant from the state, developing electronic solar permitting, so people will be able to submit applications for rooftop solar mounts electronically and get the permit electronically, same day, maybe simultaneously with their work on the computer. Also maintain the work of doing substandard housing inspections, stop work orders. You can see that there's a lot of time spent issuing stop work orders. It's over a stop work order a day that they need to do. And then ongoing inspections, I looked at the numbers. They do about an average of 2,300 inspections a year. And that number has varied, but it remains pretty constant. The projected revenue for 262 is $1.5 million. The normal general fund contribution is almost $327,000. So the total expenditures, is 2.5 million, almost 2.6 million. This leaves a delta of $700,000 that were upside down. We are proposing to deallocate one vacant building inspector position. But what that $730,000 represents is the equivalent of 2 permit technicians, a plan checker, a senior inspector, and 2 other building inspectors. And that is, if our ask really is represented to those titles, let me just say, for me, every one of those titles has a face. Moving on to code enforcement, and that's Budget Unit 269. You recently heard the report on the annual code enforcement efforts. Last year closed 140% more traditional cases than were opened, reduced a backlog of 450 cases as of 2020 to only 200 now. We are undertaking significant abatements with the Green Valley Motel, and Judy's Market, I believe, is just about wrapped up. So that was a huge ordeal just because there was hazardous materials involved. The goals for the coming year is to close out that 200 cases, close out the backlog, close out the unresolved cannabis cases. A lot of these will have appeal hearings associated with them, so we'll offer the property owners the ability to settle without going to appeal hearing, or we'll schedule the appeal hearings and then continue to abate the most significant sites that are outstanding. As previously discussed in board action, the amount of revenue available for abatements is $250,000 in the coming year, so we won't have the same amount of money to work with to abate sites. In terms of 269, the projected revenue is $143,000. One of the things that we tried to do this last year is to do more cost recovery relative to code enforcement. We found that that is really counterproductive. When people find out that you're charging them to talk to them, they're less inclined to talk to you, and they get pretty adversarial. So to the extent that we can have friendly conversations with people, knowing that they're not going to get charged, they're more likely to work with us and to abate the violations, and that's really what we're after to begin with. The proposed general fund contribution is nearly $1.5 million, so our total expenditures here are $1.9 million, and that leaves a deficit of $346,000. We are proposing to deallocate one currently vacant code compliance officer position. And so what that $346,000 represents is the loss of a code enforcement inspector, 2 code compliance officers, and a 3/4 time administrative analyst. 277 is really the parent budget unit. It's called current planning, but that's where all the administration lies. That's also where the current planning work lies, and then we're merging that with 268. So I'm talking about 268 accomplishments here as well as 277. And you probably are getting tired of hearing this, but we did 800 on-site cannabis inspections this last year. We intend to do all permitted sites this year. We did 375 remote cannabis inspections. We were able to bring to completion the Nordic Aqua Farms application in EIR and also the North McKay subdivision within current planning. The goals for 277 in the coming year is working on the Titlow Hill General Plan Amendment rezone. We want to finish all the interim cannabis permits and as I mentioned earlier, inspect all of the approved cannabis sites. In terms of projected revenue and expenditures, the revenue is nearly $2.5 million. That's roughly broken out about $1.5 million from cannabis, about $1 million from current planning. The general fund contribution is just under $1.5 million. The total expenditure is $5.1 million for that entire budget unit. This leaves a delta of $944,000. What that represents would require deallocating a senior office assistant, 3 office assistants, 2 senior planners. And it says assistant planner there, but I'm fairly certain that's more than one. I think it's in the neighborhood of 4. Oh, there it is, right there. I'm sorry. These are positions we're already deallocating. These are currently vacant positions. Those are being deallocated as part of the budget proposal. In order to make up the $944,000, we would need to, that represents 2 planning technicians, 3 associate planners, 4 assistant planners, 3 senior planners, and a quarter-time administrative analyst. Moving on to 282, the long-range planning function. This last year, they were able to complete the safe parking ordinance. They were able to complete the allocation of the DCC grants, and I think we've got, I don't have a good number, but I've signed nearly 100 of those, I think. So money is being moved out, and the Auditor Controller's Office is doing a tremendous job of issuing checks. 282 has some pretty lofty goals, starting with housing. There is a fund that's been built up that we want to use to encourage development of new housing within Humboldt County. Want to continue to work with Rio Dell and provide grant funding to owner-occupied housing to help people get their houses fixed and to get them livable again. We've also got some high priority big rocks to move in the McKinleyville Town Center, Climate Action Plan, multifamily rezone, and then we're working on sea level rise. And one of the things I should add up there is that we're also actively working on the Humboldt Bay Area Plan. You'll shortly see other ordinances that are not listed here. They may be coming through even before the end of the year, but about the turn of the fiscal year, relative to short-term rentals, billboards and signs, also developing a noise ordinance. We've got small town village or tiny home village ordinance coming forward. So there's a lot going on within this unit. The projected revenue for this, and that primarily comes from the general plan user fee. General plan user fee is about $328,000. We get a general fund contribution of about $317,000. Our total expenditures proposed to do long-range planning and housing and grants is $800,000, just over $800,000, and that leaves a deficit of $283,291. We are proposing as part of this budget to deallocate a senior planner, deallocate a housing and community program specialist, and deallocate an assistant associate planner. In terms of accomplishing the $283,000, that's representative of the planning manager, an associate planner, and the proposed program manager. So our supplemental budget request is twofold. One is for $2.3 million to preserve staff. That's the big ask. The second ask is that GIS server is probably about 3 years beyond its useful life, and that serves not only the planning and building department, but it serves the entire county, and it's a $100,000 cost, and we're asking for a supplemental budget to allow that to be replaced. In terms of the next year, we are looking at ways to reconcile our revenue with our expenses. We are looking at several significant retirements. We've got one manager retiring at the end of the year. We've got another one retiring at the end of the fiscal year. We've got one retiring at the end of the calendar year. We've got another 30-year plus employee retiring in August. There's another couple possible retirements going on there. We need to increase our revenue. Some of that primarily has to do with the discretionary projects team and the amount of billing that we do. And one of the things I'll just say is that we are working on putting together information for the union to address that, but our statistics are showing that over the last 3 years, 2 of those were with COVID time off for sickness. Our absentee rate on the discretionary team was 25%. And so it's really hard to generate revenue when you're paying benefits, but people are only there 3 hours out of 4. We also are looking at grant funding. Some of that is through staffing allocations. One of the things we already are doing is rather than having the folks that work in the housing office go out and do housing inspections, that's something that inspectors can do, and they're probably more qualified to do it anyway, and they can get paid for it. That then pays the inspectors to continue to do work that they're fully capable of doing. We're also looking at new grants having to do with not only housing, but also having to do with abatement and cleaning up sites, remediating sites, and also grants having to do with long-range planning. We currently have $400,000 in this budget that is coming in from grant money, and so we're experiencing some success with that, but we want to expand that greatly. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director Ford. Any questions from the board? Certainly a complex department. Lots of moving parts, for sure. Supervisor Baldwin.
What's Fort Bragg's budget look like? Anyway, no. With the online submittals, will there be a tracking, a timestamp on those so they can follow up to make sure when they get it in, so we make sure that it's being looked at, and then will there be a follow-up when somebody actually pulls it and the work is done on it, so they will be able to follow it online also? Because it seems to me it's great if they institute inline, but if they have to come in or call every time to find out, hey, what's going on with my plan? What's going on with my plan? We end up back at square one. So is there going to be a full service online submittal, or is this
Full service online submittal, and when an application comes in, it will ping a couple of different people to identify them that there is an application in place, and it'll also keep the applicant notified when actions are taking place. So if say the permit manager opens it, starts looking at it, the applicant is notified that, okay, your application is now in process, it's being reviewed. And so those, yes, probably better communication than now.
That would make a big difference, I think, for you guys all the way around, and less staff. The substandard housing inspections, are those going to be, they probably won't be owner initiated. Will they be renter initiated? Will it be neighbor initiated? Because it can actually be more time consuming for, if we get into a tit for tat system.
Yeah, they are rarely owner initiated.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So
the owner's pretty much aware.
So it's a situation where, there's somebody angry about something, and it's a call, usually comes in through the code enforcement line, and then gets directed to building, and the inspector gets sent out to look at it, do an assessment whether or not it's substandard or not.
No, and maybe I saw this in my sleep. Isn't there a state rental assistance, state standards for rental housing?
There probably are. One of the things that we need to look at is having maintenance provisions or blight provisions within our ordinance, so that's something we can enforce against. Currently, we don't. We really only have it when it's completely substandard, and that's a decision that's made. It can look like crud, but may not be substandard.
Everything functions, yeah. I understand. Yeah, because trailer parks are managed by the state.
Mm-hmm.
We don't code enforce on trailer parks.
Correct.
So I was just wondering if there's anything reciprocal on rental units.
No.
And then are we finding out, are we getting as many solar permits as there was? Because and the only reason was I just went to put it on my house and was basically talked out of it. So anyway.
They continue to come in. I don't have the statistics on those, but one of the things that the state has required in the coming year, that be a completely electronic process, and that it basically be issued electronically. And so the state even issued grants to make that happen. We've applied for one of the grants. We're already engaged with Excella and App Maker to integrate the two so that they can go right in through Excella, enter into the app, have the permit reviewed and approved and issued.
Because it's still set up as a one-day permit, right, basically?
It should be an over-the-counter. It is an over-the-counter permit.
That'll make somebody happy, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Supervisor Wilson. I'm sorry.
First, through the chair, first question, do you see do you think there might be opportunities for revenue with relationship to programs for implementation of the CAP, the Climate Action Plan?
Yeah, that would be probably a good source of funds through grant funding to do that, absolutely.
Okay. And then with relationship to the general plan update, which is now, what is it, 2017 is when? So, and I heard you kind of name off a few things that are in the update in some of the long-term planning, and so that, I think this sounds like this year is we're going to have some of those coming up. Do you feel fund impinged in those activities in terms of the current budget? And
yes, but I know there's stress all the way around in terms of the budget, but absolutely. One of my hopes is that we are able to get grant funding and fund people that way, and then also within 277, some of the staff that we've got there, that if we get the additional general plan funding, to be able to use that funding also to work in 282, which is long-range planning, and expand that effort.
And in the number, I mean, there seemed to be a small decrease in commercial permit applications. It wasn't huge, but is the size, like kind of the square foot annual change, has that changed in terms of the aggregate size of those commercial activities, or what was the change? Because I was trying to figure out, you had changes in the in sort of the permit numbers, but they weren't all that dramatic on any one particular category. So I was thinking maybe
it's value.
It's the value.
Yeah. So it's the value of a structure. So if you're doing a lot of remodels and not a lot of new construction, there's not as much value in the remodel as there is in the construction. And I think the numbers were like 21, 36, and I want to say 14 for last year. So the new commercial construction has gone down.
The new commercial construction, as opposed to so it's the commercial ones. We weren't separating them. Only in the housing we're separating the remodels versus
they were separated. There was 78 remodels.
Okay.
Of commercial. That's tenant improvements, things like that. But it's the new commercial construction that has value, adds a lot of value, and we really haven't seen anything new and big come through recently that where there's a big value in terms of a permit fee.
Okay, those are my questions.
And I've got Supervisor Arroyo.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for all your work on this. It's not an easy place to be, and I know we've had many long conversations about these changes that you're seeing in your department. So, yeah, it's not easy. But I was going to ask you if you have a sense. I know you can't, we talked about how you can't really reflect the savings from retirements in this budget because in some cases, we don't know exactly when folks will retire and exactly what those costs will be associated with them, you know, using up all their leave, et cetera. So that said, do you have a general idea of what that will look like and how, because we're going to be budgeting for positions that ultimately, I'm kind of assuming that once those folks retire, some of those positions may not be filled to help with the budget. So could you speak to that a little bit and what you foresee there?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, before I came over this afternoon, I was talking to the administrative manager about one of the retirements in particular. This employee has a manager salary, has been here since before 1997. So they get paid out for their sick leave. They have over 2,200 hours of sick leave. That's over a year's salary that we're going to have to pay next year. So we're going to see no salary savings there. The administrative services manager is retiring at about mid-year. This is not pre-1997, so there will be a half a year of savings minus whatever vacation time there is, and the person works an awful lot, so I imagine they have a pretty good balance of vacation time. There's a third retirement of a long-term employee, 35 years, pre-1997, doesn't have the same savings of sick leave, so that won't be as high. And so we're probably going to about break even on the retirements, but going into 24, 25, that's when the savings will begin to be seen.
Great. Thank you. Supervisor Bone.
And John, I don't know historically, but you know, there was a time when we were doing 400 to 500 family residents annually. In the last few years, it's dropped off immensely. And so we're consistent with the drop off that's been taken on consistently. So, and I don't think we're ever going to see that part come back because most of those builders have gone. So, when this is all said and done, everything else, are we adjusting to a new situation? Because I mean, cannabis permits, we have 950 out there.
Left or approved?
Approved.
There's over 1,000.
1,000 approved, and how many do we have left out there?
To permit, there's in the neighborhood about 600.
Okay, and we're getting in a few new ones. Very few.
I talked to somebody today that is going to bring a new one in, and that'll be the first new one in 2 years.
And there's resubmittals that they thought they were going to take.
There's a lot of modifications.
There's a lot of resubmittals and modifications. So I mean, we're still going to need a little bit there and stuff like that. But is this going to be the new us, the downsized us? Do you think? Are we adjusting appropriately? Efficiencies. COVID's over. I know you had some pretty stark numbers, the efficiency numbers of your department during COVID. So hopefully those efficiencies will come up. So this is not a good picture, but is it a more adjusted? It's still an ugly picture, but not as ugly as we thought.
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on. One is that the status of things going into a recessive time is everybody's being more conservative now. And so that's going to affect the economy. That always affects planning and building. I would say, though, that there's some other things going on in the county. And I'm maybe getting a little off topic now, but really need some additional discussion relative to what's going on with offshore wind, with the harbor, with Nordic, with the university. And we have some needs that we have to address. And a lot of that surrounds housing. And how are we going to address that? And so I think that's a different discussion. I don't know that just zoning it and they'll build it is true anymore. But I think that we need to find a way to lead the way relative to this effort to encourage offshore wind to happen. And part of that is housing employees.
It just, you know, I mean, you saw it yesterday, the average house in California, not necessarily here, is $768,000, and the rest of the nation is $343,000. So I'm just saying, because we've added so many different costs to building a house in California, and we're not stopping, so it just gets to be a situation where it's just not, it's prohibitive. That's what the guys are leaving for. That's what most of the contractors are saying, and they said it 3 years ago in our meeting. When we had our meeting, it says our costs are too prohibitive here, and 3 years later, they're, you know, so.
In fairness, with all due respect, the costs are not the county costs, though.
No, I understand. No, they're not all the county costs there, but I mean, then costs and restrictions, and then throw in solar, sprinklers, everything else. So, I mean, that's just the thing is, I mean, you know, you had McKay Ranch up there, and I'll give probably anybody 10 to 1 odds that never happens, just because he's done. So I'm just, anyway.
Thank you, Supervisor Bone. And we're going to go ahead. Thank you, Director Ford. Appreciate your presentation. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we have 3 more presentations. So 5 minutes. Let's be back promptly, please. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are back from recess, and we're going to jump back in. We have 3 more presentations. It is 4:10, and CAO Hayes, next.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. Next, we have Human Resources Director Zach Ohannon, and he is the most brief human I've ever met, so I have no doubts that this presentation will be the same.
Okay, the clock starts now.
Well, you're in luck because I have a bunch of staff members with me who are going to talk, so you don't have to listen to me talk the whole time because I am not long-winded. So yeah, do we have the presentation? There it is. Yeah, so we will fly through this because I know we're getting towards the end of the day. Like I said, I have some staff members here with me. I really wanted them to come up and talk to you about some of the work that they do, again, because you hear me talk all the time. So I'll move along here. Before I get into this, actually, so the HR org chart, if you look at it, kind of splits into 2. It's not really speaking to this slide, but we have the personnel side and we have the risk management side. But a lot of people may know that we've actually added an organizational development and diversity, equity, inclusion division, and it resides under risk management currently. So I like to always kind of make that differentiation that we really kind of have 3 separate divisions now. And during this presentation, we're not going to focus as much on the numbers. We have a fairly small budget in personnel, and then the risk budget is mainly insurances. So that's what kind of inflates it and makes it look so big, but that's really a county cost. So again, we'll talk a little bit about the numbers. I will, but I just really wanted staff to talk to you about what we're doing actually with the money that you're giving us. So one of the things that we're doing is we are working on our mission, vision, and values. We've been doing this as a department sort of as we have time to do so. It's something that hadn't really ever been done in human resources that I'm aware of. And so and actually the timing of it was kind of good in that we were doing strategic planning with your board. And so we've been working on this kind of almost in conjunction with those efforts. And so I won't read everything that's on the slide there, but as you can see, the acronym reads people. We're human resources. We do people stuff. That's kind of our thing.
Extra points for the acronym.
There we go. Yeah, we nailed it. Nailed it on the acronym. But we actually did take a lot of time. You know, we didn't just go, okay, let's take people and try to make it fit. You know, it actually kind of just organically got there. So our mission, is to provide excellent services to meet the needs of the most valuable resource, which is our employees or people. Our vision, which I do think aligns with a lot of the efforts that have come out of the CAO's office, that your board has directed, is to make the county the employer of choice in this area. And again, I won't read the whole vision statement. And then where we get the people acronym is from our values. We just recently went and took this photo. I have to say, I saw a photo on the City of Eureka's HR site, and I said, why don't we have a photo of our whole staff? I gotta get a photo. And that's not our whole staff there, but it's everyone we could put together, and at some point we're gonna Photoshop everybody else in there. But this is also part of the work we've done is our model to commitment. Again, I won't read all of those to you. You can look at them later or read them yourselves. But really kind of trying to set a foundation for our department, something that, again, hasn't been done since I've been here, around standards and expectations of the employees in the HR department, and not just coming down from myself or our management team, but really working with staff internally to make sure we're all on the same page and we're all understanding of what those standards and expectations are and kind of how we carry out the work that we do every day. So, like I said, you know I like to talk, and I'm going to pass it off so you don't have to listen to me talk anymore, but I will introduce Catherine Lorenzo. She is our Human Resources Information System and Benefit Compliance Program Manager, and she's going to talk, we're going to have two people talking a little bit about some stuff going on in personnel. The one thing I will say, since we're talking about budgets, in our personnel division, we have 6 allocated positions, and so one of the ARGFAs you'll see from our department is related to additional funding to maintain those 6 positions. The other ARGFA that you'll see, which isn't recommended, and I totally understand that, but through discussion with the CAO and our budget ad hoc committee, we determined that it would be good to throw that on the ARGFA list as sort of a talking point for your board. That second one has to do with the Assistant Director of Human Resources. So currently that position is vacant. There was a recruitment for that position a little while ago, and it didn't result in someone taking the position. But as we saw sort of the budget going the way it was, and to maintain the staff that we have in our department, what I've chosen to do is not fill that position currently. That's sort of how we account for that 10% vacancy rate. For us, a 10% vacancy rate would be a loss of 1 of 6 employees. It's actually kind of interesting how that position is paid for. It sits in risk management, but 80% of the cost is actually transitioned over from personnel to risk management. It took me a while to wrap my head around that. So that's in a way sort of how we have accounted for that cut. So again, through that discussion, putting it out there, it is a vital position for the organization and for the department, but however, totally understand that we want to do our part in these difficult fiscal times. So with that, I'll stop talking and I'll pass it over to Catherine.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As Zach mentioned, I oversee the HRIS component of personnel and human resources. And HRIS mainly focuses on data management, all of that employee data and benefits. So I'll just start with some of our successes over the past fiscal year, and we'll transition from there. So as you're all well aware, we had some destabilization in the HRIS and payroll services that the county was providing in the previous fiscal year, and so we've had an opportunity to stabilize HRIS. We've been able to work with our auditor controller's office and the payroll division to transition most of the services that we've identified as truly payroll or fiscal services from human resources, and that has allowed our internal team to stabilize. We've also made some transformations in the area of our new employee orientation. We've brought it back to in-person, revamped it a little bit, made sure that we're providing information to our newly onboarded employees that help them better understand that the work that they're doing, making connections with the broader organization, and just having a little bit better comfort level with their participation in the overall, in their position and organization as a whole. We've improved compliance with public employee retirement law. I won't get into all the details of that since we're keeping it brief today, but that can get pretty complicated, and we were able to make a much needed revision to one of our contracts with CalPERS. So that was something that had sort of been on hold for a few years or been in transition for a few years, and we were able to accomplish that, as well as some process improvement that will help us be more compliant. We had 2 audits in the last year, a couple of findings that again gave us the opportunity to change some things, become more compliant, and that's something that we'll continue to work on, and I'll touch on that when I get to the goals section. In addition to these things and much more, we've processed over 3,000 personnel action forms and other employee-related forms, and done so in a way that we've developed trust and reliability, and just tried to improve that relationship with employees, which is really critical to employee satisfaction overall. Some of our goals that are upcoming in this next fiscal year is to complete the transition of payroll services. We had, obviously an abrupt transition initially, and that team has had to stabilize. They're still working on some stabilization internally, so we're maintaining a portion of those services until we can actually see that through in collaboration with their team. So that'll be one of the goals for the upcoming year. And then just as importantly, increasing the use of our programs that we currently own. As a large public organization, I think that we've been challenged in the past and currently in using some of the programs that we have and being effective with the use of those programs. So the slide highlights some of those. I won't read the entire thing or go over every detail. Of course, feel free to ask any questions, but we use several different types of programs, some of which we have recently updated, some of which need updating, and many of which we could use more effectively. So I'll just summarize by saying that. And then lastly, support that is needed in the future and currently to really provide the best level of service that we can provide would be continuing to invest in technological infrastructure, which is including technical support and analytical staff. We've had challenges, obviously being a rural county, we sometimes have a difficult time getting individuals in positions and key positions that really help maintain those systems. So making sure that we're able to fund and focus on that, as well as supporting adaptation to increasing service needs. Every year we see legislative changes in the area of pension reform, and also just public employee retirement law is constantly evolving, and so the compliance in that area can be very challenging and requires additional resources, as well as having a growing workforce. Obviously, currently we're looking at reducing that, but of course we still have that HRIS piece, and data compliance unfortunately doesn't go away. And then as we seek creative solutions to recruitment and retention, which Cass will speak to next, we need that support within the HRIS team and the technology to help see that through. So with that, I thank you for your time. We'll transition.
All right, thank you, Catherine. And I just noticed we're in budget hearings and we're advocating for IT support. So you're welcome, IT. So next, one of the fun things that we get to do, and we get to do a lot of fun things, but one of the things that I always had a lot of fun doing is recruitment. That's fun. You're meeting people and trying to get them to come and work for the county. So with that, I will introduce Cass Briley. She is one of our human resources analysts. She is actually the liaison to you as board members. So if you ever have questions, you can certainly ask me, but you can also ask Cass. So with that, I will pass it to Cass.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, board, for having me. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about recruitment and outreach. We have increased our efforts to improve our recruitment process and kind of reach out to both local people as well as people from out of the area for all of our positions. In 2022, the three analysts, we flew 397 recruitments, so over 100 each. We screened over 6,000 applications for the year, and the median lifespan for a regular recruitment when we received the request from the department to fill a position to when we provided them with a referred list of candidates was 60 days. So a regular recruitment, meaning a recruitment that is not open until filled, and barring any other like extensions of deadlines, it takes about 60 days. We also have made some significant changes to our job bulletins. So that's really big. It's helped us a lot with attracting candidates, just making the job bulletins more inviting and kind of a more logical flow. It has also allowed departments to personalize their job bulletins more and make it really personal to their specific department and their needs for that position. Also, another thing that we've been doing, which is really fun, and we're kind of getting out in the community more and representing the county, is career days. So we went to the Cal Poly Humboldt Career Day a few months back and had a presence there, as well as the College of the Redwoods. They did a career fair as well as they called it like an academic career day. So there's two separate career days that they did, and we were there. So that's that top picture is Patty and I at the CR Career Day. And so we really just want to continue making appearances at any kind of local events like that, as well as events out of the area, like virtual career fairs for different colleges, more specific positions going forward. So we're looking at continuing our active recruiting and increasing our presence in the community. Speaking to Zach, what Zach said about really just wanting to be the employer of choice, which we can't do if we're not out there and people don't know that we're here. So yeah, and the next slide, these are just a couple examples of our new job bulletins for those who maybe haven't seen them. These are some that I worked on with Public Works and the District Attorney's Office. So it used to just be the job spec on the recruitment flyer. It was very boring. It didn't really have any personality. So we were able to add some blurbs that are written by the department and allow them to kind of put in plain terms what they're looking for in the position. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on these from candidates and from departments. So that's it.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Quick question, Supervisor?
What's the time frame from when we pick a candidate to the actually on the payroll? I know it used to be extreme, and you guys have shortened it up quite a bit, but.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't have an answer right off the top of my head. It has shortened, but it really depends.
Used to be like 55 days, and by that time they found another job.
Yeah, I know that the ones you hear about the most are like the sheriff's department.
And I understand that with the psych and all
with
that.
the background and all that stuff. For our department, based on the things that we do, it can be we get our list. We actually have 2 new staff starting today, and they started within a couple weeks. And it really just came down to how much time we needed to give the other department. But yeah, it has decreased. I don't have a number off the top of my head, but that's something we could look into and report back.
Anytime we can put them to work quicker, makes them happier. And yeah,
we definitely want them here as quickly as possible. Yeah, that's for sure.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor Bone. And next.
Back to the presentation. Do I just push the button? Or does it pop back up? There we go. So risk management. So I'm going to ask Amanda.
She's over there?
She's over there. She crept over there. So the one thing I'll say about risk management is it is in our internal service fund. So essentially all the costs for this department are dispersed out to other county departments. And when we're talking budget-wise, again, I won't get super detailed. Why you see that budget so large is because of all our insurance costs. And I think all you board members know that, but members of the public, that's why risk management's budget looks the way it is. Insurance is currently kind of outrageous these days to insure any public agency. So it really has nothing to do with us per se. We're part of a risk pool called PRISM, and they negotiate rates for us, and we're also impacted by other members of PRISM. So with that, speaking to the budget portion, I will now hand it off to Amanda.
Now is it on? Yes, okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you and speak about the past year's successes, some of our challenges, and then our goals into the future. So as Catherine alluded to earlier, we have been in a period of much turnover, and this past year we've been able to stabilize our staffing levels. It's been tremendous in being able to provide newer staff members with training. Staff have made great progress in redesigning workflows, bolstering processes, and increasing risk presence throughout the county. We also had the pleasure of retaining a consultant to complete a countywide audit of all risk-related responsibilities, and we're currently in the process of designing the framework for implementation of suggestions and recommendations from him to pivot the county into a more proactive risk management approach. We were also made aware of an actuarial report which made it appear as though there were millions of dollars of outstanding liability which actually did not exist. Through our work, we discovered that the dollars were related to data entry errors and claims in our claims management software in need of closure and updates. And to date, we have rectified over $8 million with about $2 million to go. We've also been evaluating our county's benefits offerings, and we've worked with partners to provide more innovative and valuable options to employees. The two that I can talk about today with more on the way, one is a partnering with Rural County Representatives of California and Golden State Finance Authority through recommendation of Supervisor Bones. You're repping today. And Golden State Finance Authority offers down payment and closing cost assistance to county employees, and that's a full stop. It doesn't have to be your first house. There aren't any income limits, and so we had a really great kickoff event and quite a bit of interest. And so far, 2 county employees have purchased homes and made it through the entire process. Also in the past year, we changed our county's workers' compensation third-party administrators to Intercare Insurance Holdings. This process has assisted us in shining a light on the county's workers' comp program and provided a roadmap to developing a robust and thoughtful program which will seek to mitigate exposure to occupational illnesses and injuries and meaningfully keep employees safely at work. Pivoting here to some of our challenges, as I mentioned at the top, that staffing upheaval has resulted in a loss of history and boots on the ground knowledge. Unfortunately, a lot of processes and procedures were not documented as they should have been. So we have been working diligently to get those all documented so that this will not happen again in the future. Risk is responsible for the insurance and indemnification language in all of the county's contracts. As you are all uniquely aware, there are lots and lots of contracts that come through risk management. And with each department having 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or more contract preparers, this creates a very inverse filter where they all have to run through risk management, and we're working very hard on ensuring more timeliness while taking our job to ensure that we're protecting the county as seriously as possible. As you all know, managing safety is everybody's job, not just risk management's job, but we receive hundreds of claims, incident reports, vehicle accident reports, and safety concerns every year from both the public and citizens. And utilizing our current process for mining all of this great data it isn't yielding the results that we need to be extremely proactive and work to mitigate and stop any potential hazards before it ends up costing the county money. And then as you can see on our goals slide here, we are going to be utilizing the results of our risk audit to implement many different goals in the next few years. Our guiding documents are in desperate need of updating, as are some of our current processes. I look very forward to coming before you in the near future to present you with more detailed information related to the audit and to our plans. I also look forward to your board's input as we move toward a proactive risk management approach in Humboldt County. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Lots and lots of good opportunities in risk after we receive that. I'm really excited to bring that report to your board at some point soon. So one more thing we're going to talk about in risk is COVID. We didn't think we were going to be hearing about COVID in the board chambers anymore, but unfortunately, COVID is still a thing, and it is definitely still a thing for human resources. Many people might not know, but even though public health doesn't do contact tracing, we as human resources have to do that. And Jennifer Oakley here is one of our human resources technicians who is the spearhead of that. And so she's here to talk to you a little bit about COVID.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, members of the board. So, in general, COVID, unfortunately, hate to be the bearer of bad news, it is not over, especially on the employer's end. So, in February of this year, Cal OSHA released their temporary non-emergency, or excuse me, their permanent non-emergency standards. So, as an employer, we are required for the next 2 years to notify employees in the exposed group when they have been exposed in the workplace. We need to contact positive cases to provide them with their return to work criteria and inform them of their leave and workers' compensation options. We also need to notify union representatives, and we must provide outbreaks. There's locations, if there are 3 or more cases within a 14-day period, that's considered a Cal OSHA outbreak. And so they have different requirements as well. And in this calendar year alone, in the 5 months that we've been in 2023, there's already been 13 outbreaks at different locations. So obviously, this is still very much an aspect of an employer and our duty. And so for our successes this past fiscal year, we've had 541 cases from July 22 until the present. So that's 541 times that isolation guidance and return to work criteria have been given, and that's over 500 workplace exposure notifications, and that's just a little piece of the puzzle. Our main challenges are keeping up to date with COVID-19 related protocol because it is an ever-changing landscape, and to provide correct and relevant guidance to both departments and staff. A lot of our guidance is hinged upon the California Department of Public Health, and so those can change at the drop of a dime, as it were. So those are our main challenges, and our goals are just to continue to maintain Cal OSHA compliance and reduce our staff's COVID-19 exposures by being really timely in these processes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. And one thing I'll hit on again is this is definitely an unfunded mandate. However, your board actually in last year's budget cycle allocated Jennifer's position. So we do have a position allocated to do this through 2025. And then from there, we don't know what it's going to look like. We'll see when that happens. But for now, we will continue to meet our requirements. And last but not least, like I spoke about before, this is sort of the third division or third branch of Human Resources, the newly formed Organizational Development and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Division. I will pass over to Dr. Jeremy Michael Clark, but I'll say first, this is some of the work that I have the most fun, I guess you could say, doing and talking with Jeremy about this. So I love that we're doing this work, and I know you hear from Jeremy quite a bit, but he's here to give you some more updates on the work that we're doing.
Thanks, Zach. Yes, this is the fun stuff. Like this is a lot of fun. So as Director Ohanan pointed out, this is the newest division of Human Resources. I am very proud to report that in the time that we've been in existence, we have quite a few successes that we can laud. And I'm not going to read them all, but what I will say is that these successes were really intended to support our organizational transformation in a variety of ways. Some of that looks strategic, like how can we support the transformation of the agency from an organization development standpoint? What does that change look like? How can we engage stakeholders? What's the best vehicle? And there's an example of sort of the culmination of that effort is on the next slide. Some of it is really just looking at mandating with the support of your board diversity education, providing county staff with different ways to interact with diversity-related content, and that's what we do with our learning corners. I do want to take a second and just say that since we have rolled out our learning corners, they have been met with extreme success. I mean, our first one, we blew away the Zoom capacity, and our second one, we got about 65% of the original attendees, and then we have a third one, which is going to examine the intergenerational workforce and its implications for leaders, and that'll take place on May 31st. In addition to that, I would say that some of the work that we do going back to trying to support the organization through challenging times is establishing strategic partnerships with local agencies in our community, so that way we can leverage best practices, share resources, etc. And so an example of that is really looking at formalizing our relationship with HSU, or Cal Poly Humboldt, and College of the Redwoods, so we can develop that talent pipeline. Additionally, another program that I manage is our WIOA compliance for equal employment opportunity, and so I'm pleased to report that on that front, we get audited by the state every year, and on that front, we had a successful audit last year, and so that is definitely something to be noticed. From a challenges standpoint, I mean, this board has heard this all day today, obviously resources. I will say that being a newer division, it was expected that we were going to not necessarily have the largest resource allocation. We know that. We've been able to generate some successes without that. I will say, though, that as our responsibilities grow, and as we work to really not only just support the organizational transformation, but really sort of guide that, additional resources will be needed. And those resources can be used to provide training, staffing, formulate partnerships, et cetera. And I believe that you will see an item in this budget, a request for us. And I just want to convey to this body that that request really is intended to support our work moving forward. So from a goal standpoint, there is a diversity and equity and inclusion strategic plan, which really looks at how our organization can really leverage the increased diversity to achieve its goals. And so that is sort of being reviewed right now for feedback. That stakeholder engagement process, that is one of the goals, so we can ultimately bring that finished document back to your board, so that way you can formally adopt that. Of course, we want to expand our diversity education offerings, and again, research on this is very clear in that trainings aren't necessarily like a panacea, and they don't move or motivate behavior change, but experiential opportunities tend to do that more, and so we really want to sort of double down on providing staff those opportunities to engage. And then collaboratively develop some core competencies. And I want to take a second and just talk about this on the OD side, because we've heard this from other department heads throughout the day, and this is increasing retirements, burnout, I want to say, and then as people get burned out, then they may retire early, or if they were on the fence, that may be the push that they need to sort of retire. Probably one of our greatest challenges around that is going to be knowledge transfer, transferring that knowledge from those long-term employees into the hands of other employees. And so in that vein, I spoke to Zach, and a major effort of our work is going to be really looking at sort of succession planning over this next fiscal year so we can address that issue. If we can go to the next slide, please, boss. All right, and then lastly, this slide really just demonstrates how far we've come. I will say 6 months ago, none of this existed. So I brought to this board Workplace 2030 about 4 or 5 months ago, said, hey, we are going to establish some permanent committees across these 5 domains. Proud to report that those committees have been established. They have their executive sponsors. They have chairs. And as we can see, the participation is quite broad. I will say proudly that the interest in these 5 committees was off the charts. And it really hurt me that we couldn't really accommodate everyone who was interested. But these are the organizational leaders, the highly engaged organizational citizens that are really going to make recommendations to move our work forward. And then you may recall the affinity groups that we also brought to your board late last year. We have 4 of them that are in existence today. These chairs work very diligently to run these groups. They are very well attended. Our most popular one is our queer affinity group. That is so popular that we are looking at maybe adding a second queer affinity group. And so this is really just meant to demonstrate really all of the work that we've accomplished over the last 6 to 7 months. So that being said, that's it.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thank you, Jeremy. I jumped past that last slide, but that's the end. Final thoughts I have are just that we have a small staff, but they're all extremely dedicated, and we're doing a lot with the resources that we have, and we will do our part to work our way through these fiscally uncertain times. And with that, if you have any questions for us, we are here.
All right, great, thank you. Any questions from the board? Really an amazing team of effort. All right, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Wilson.
Let's see here. This has to do, well, I want to say, like, you do have a lot of fun stuff going on for sure. And I actually did go to recruitment at Cal Poly, and that was really fun. I do recommend board members take some time to do that, because it is great to talk to prospective employees. And we also have part of the orientation now. And so that's good. I was just wondering, you had some partners up there with relationship to the DEI work, which was Cal Poly, CR, and
Humboldt Area Foundation.
Humboldt Area, HAF. And do you feel like there's good support in those organizations? And I mean, how's that affinity working?
Yeah. So I feel like it's in its beginning phases. So I'm on the board of Providence St. Joe's, and so I get to work with Dr. Jackson on that. And so that relationship will definitely help. I will say, I think the world of Brianna Lipper at Humboldt Area Foundation. Brianna and I have had many conversations about how she can support our work. And so we will be engaging in another one of those conversations very soon. Definitely a very big stakeholder there. And then as far as CR, there's a lot of opportunities. And here's this idea sort of came to me in terms of formalizing these relationships, because if you poll our workforce staff, you see that without formal relationships, a lot of our staff are alums of CR and of Cal Poly. And so imagine the power if we can formalize that relationship, then that should be beneficial to both agencies. So said a lot. On the DEI side, I've connected with Aaliyah Dunphy, the EEO, and the Chief Diversity Officer for CR as well. There's some areas to collaborate as well on there. So yeah, beginning phases, because we had a busy 6 months, as you can see from the previous slide, but definitely optimistic about the potential with establishing these relationships.
And through the chair, it really shows there the pent-up demand with relationship to the participation of employees in those programs. And it just sounds like a more inclusive and fun place to work.
Absolutely.
When you have those opportunities. I have a question around the COVID, if that's all right.
I need my COVID expert for that.
Okay, COVID expert. So is what I understood, there was 541 confirmed positives within a population of around 2,000 in the last fiscal year.
That's pretty
Okay,
high.
that's a lot. So
Yes.
that, I mean, and I don't know what that means necessarily through, you know, whether that's more or less within the general population, but it does show that, I mean, with a lot of that comes, you know, people not being able to make it to work and not doing it. I mean, it actually impacts productivity, not beyond just like the health impacts and the concerns we have about folks, you know, being sick or, you know, and so I just wanted to just, I just didn't believe it, so I wanted to just see that was really true.
It's
so,
true.
okay.
541 cases in the
Yeah.
past fiscal year.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As far as I know, I wasn't one of them, but we'll see.
I'll add, we do get the question a lot from departments of, I have this sick employee, and the answer is send them home.
Yeah.
And whether it's COVID, the sniffles, like you say, I think a lot of people think, oh, I got to get in, I got to work. But really that has a ripple effect when you get, if my office got COVID, which it has, that has happened. And luckily we didn't all get it, but if we all got it, then HR would shut down. So regardless of, you know, how you feel about COVID or any illness, really, we need to start. I think this has been a time where we've realized, like, hey, any illness really doesn't need to be brought into the workplace, and that's where remote work has been really helpful. You know, it's not always been successful in certain areas, but certainly seeing that as an opportunity when we see things like this. I don't feel so bad that I can't work a little bit. Okay, cool, then work from home. So yeah, that's just want to put that out there. If you're sick, please stay home.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you. And I will actually have some little deeper questions related to the insurance issues that you had, but not right now. I'm going to save those, so I'll talk to you about them later.
And when you said the last fiscal year, was that 21, 22?
From July 22 until present, we've had
So it's not even the
541
full
cases.
fiscal year. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And I just would like also to add that a part of our contact tracing, we do notify close contacts when we have been informed that they are a close contact. And I feel like that's a really proactive way for us to get employees to make sure they self-monitor themselves for symptoms so that we don't continue to spread it, especially in the workplace, but also in the community. So.
Well done. All right. Supervisor Bone?
Instance, get back here, COVID gal. But we've changed the COVID. Now you're going back on your own sick leave, right? So now it's out of your, it's because it's unreported. We don't verify that you have COVID. Now, I'm not saying nobody didn't have it, but
The
if you
supplemental
have
sick
symptoms,
leave
you can
bank-
say you have COVID, but you were getting paid out of a COVID fund. It didn't affect your sick leave. Now it actually comes out of your sick with the emergency stopped, right?
Correct. As of 2023, we no longer have the supplemental paid sick leave. And so unfortunately, employees will now have to dip into their own sick banks. And that's another piece why COVID is still really important in regards to tracing, is because of the workers' compensation side of that. So if an employee does become ill with COVID, they do have the opportunity to apply for workers' comp if that was contracted in the workplace. So there are some pieces that they have to prove, and the contact tracing element of that is a helpful piece for them in their workers' comp claim.
All right.
Yep.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate y'all. Okay, we're good. And our next presentation is CIO Hayes.
Thank you, Chair Madrone. We are working down to the second to last department presentation. And up next, we have Interim Agricultural Commissioner Waylon Shaw.
Welcome.
I don't have an entourage. And I do have a PowerPoint.
I'm good.
All right, good afternoon, Chair Madrone, members of the board. Waylon Shaw, representing the Agriculture Department. The Agriculture Department responsible for 2 budget units, the Agricultural Commissioner's Office as well as Wildlife Services. So these are kind of our mission statements for each budget unit: protecting and promoting the county's agriculture industry while also protecting human health and the environment, striving for community confidence and equity in the marketplace through fair and uniform enforcement of laws, regulations, and ordinances through community education and engagement. So Wildlife Services provides protections to the general public and farming and ranching businesses from the risks posed by exposure to wildlife diseases and damage or losses of domestic animals from wildlife predation. So we'll go through the Agricultural Commissioner's Office programs first, and then talk just a little bit about Wildlife Services. So this is a breakdown of the revenue for the Agricultural Commissioner's Office. 33% from general fund contribution, and the other 67% is from charges for current services, as well as other governmental agencies, which are contracts with our partners at the state. Those partners being the California Department of Food and Agriculture, Department of Pesticide Regulation, as well as the Department of Cannabis Control. So we'll start with some of just the agriculture programs. Pesticide Use Enforcement Program, High-Risk Pest Exclusion, Pest Management, Direct Marketing, the Organic Program, and our Cannabis Cultivation Compliance. So in fiscal year 22-23, we've done inspections on pesticide use monitoring, as well as headquarters inspections for employee safety, as well as requirements for record retentions. So far, we've done 30 total inspections of production agriculture, as well as structural pest control. Within those 30 total inspections, we've had 48 violations of various California Code of Regulations and business and profession codes. And out of those violations, we have levied 2 agricultural civil penalties. But sorry, those are all 3 agricultural civil penalties, 2 for $250 and 1 for $500. So this is just an example of some of the violations we see out here. The picture on the left is a herbicide drift episode. The pasture on the right-hand side was a certified organic pasture. So that property owner had to exclude the cows from grazing on that area for 3 years. The picture on the right is a structural application. That window is a 2nd-story window. As you can see, it's open. I actually did that inspection, and I stopped the application from happening. And both of those instances resulted in a civil penalty. So our next program is the high-risk pest exclusion. We inspect incoming shipments of plants, flowers, and produce to prevent the introduction of pests and diseases. And those are usually done at the shipping facilities such as UPS and FedEx. So speaking of a high-risk pest that we're on the lookout for is the spotted lanternfly. They're having a real problem with that insect back east, and it's slowly making its way west. It has about 100 hosts. One of their favorites is the Tree of Heaven. It's pretty significant because we have a fair amount of population out in like Willow Creek and the 299 corridor through Trinity County. So we're actually working with CDFA to map all the locations of the Tree of Heaven for, hopefully we don't ever get it, but if it does make it this way, that's its preferred host. And then annually we do pest detection trapping throughout the county. These are some invasive insects that are in California but aren't in our area. So the upper left is a spongy moth, the upper right hand corner is the Japanese beetle, and the one at the bottom is glassy winged sharpshooter. And within our pest management program, we have our noxious weed program. These are the 3 main weeds that we're actively managing right now. The upper left is knotweed. There's 3 different species that we're dealing with in the county right now. The upper right-hand corner is the spotted knapweed, and the lower one is a tansy ragwort. So we're actively manually removing some of these species, but we're also putting out biocontrol. Yes. Yeah. The one over here on the purple? Yeah, it's spotted knapweed. And if you have any questions about like specifics about any of these species, I'd be happy to provide that information later. So a couple biocontrol we're working on putting out is the tansy flea beetle. The adults feed on the leaves of the tansy, and the larvae actually damage the root system, and it will kill the plant. The other one is the knotweed psyllid. Actually feeds on the sap of the knotweed, and it will eventually kill the plant. So we plan on later on this year, hopefully obtaining some of the tansy flea beetle. We usually get those from Del Norte, but the last couple of years it's been kind of difficult to get them. And we're working with USDA to get more knotweed psyllids. This is a knotweed site next to the Eureka High School, and it's slowly getting larger and starting to creep down into the gully. And so we're kind of concerned about that as far as spread goes. If you're not familiar with the knotweed, it's a member of the bamboo family, so it grows aggressively and can crack like foundations. We have an organic and direct marketing. They work with producers for registration, any amendments, and doing inspections at the farms. Staff also oversees the farmers markets and the direct marketing for the agricultural products to the public. Currently, we have 121 certified producers as well as 140 registered organic producers. And we are conducting with Department of Cannabis Control, cannabis compliance inspections. So we go out to the farms, make sure everything's tagged correctly, the waste area is secure, and we also take measurements for square footage for accuracy. So that was the agricultural side. This is the weights and measures side. So currently this fiscal year, July to the present, we have conducted 849 weighing devices were tested. Out of those, 135 are out of tolerance, as well as 880 measuring devices were tested. That includes all the gas pumps as well as propane dispensers, and 68 were out of tolerance. We also do quantity control, and that's usually complaint driven. We look at labeled products for accuracy. In this case, you can barely see it, but the net content weight for that product was 2.59 pounds. We took it back to the lab, put it on our certified scale, and the whole content was actually 2.52 pounds. So that's part of what we do, and that product was taken off sale. We'll transition to wildlife services. This is funded in total by a general fund contribution. Protects the public from exposure to wildlife diseases and provides protection to farming and ranching businesses from losses due to wildlife. Those three species are the ones that usually garner the most calls for assistance. And so this graph is from the biannual report from July to December of this fiscal year, and you can see all the calls for assistance from the public. Questions, comments, criticisms? I'll take it all.
Thanks for the brevity at 5 o'clock.
Hey, man, I was motoring.
Any questions from the board? Supervisor Wilson.
Wrong button. This has to do with the invasives. It seems like the invasives you concern, or this department concerns itself with, is just really around agricultural invasives, which the knotweed by the school is, I guess, is not. Is there a concern that that will get into some sort of agricultural impact or something? Because we also have invasives around English ivy, and we have invasives around, Scotch broom and some others, and some of these are even sold in our nurseries. And so I was just kind of wondering, are any of on the list that you're concerned about, are any of those ornamentals that are sold in our nurseries?
Yeah, those are always a concern. We actually focus more, are mandated to take action against the A-rated pests that aren't of great distribution, especially in our area. And so that's why the knotweed is we're mandated to take an action on it, either try to eradicate it or else really intensively manage it.
So there's a list when you say A-rated? Yeah. And was just those 3 plants, or there's more?
No, there's more. It's a pretty extensive list, but the California Department of Food and Agriculture puts out ratings for these pests. A being ones that, the Agriculture Department is mandated to take an action. And the C-rated pests are the ones that are kind of widely distributed, where they're kind of out there.
And are the A-rated ones then banned from sale and are?
They very well should be, yes, but occasionally they do pop up. Yeah.
Okay. Would you mind sending me that list when you get a chance?
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much. And our final presentation of the day.
Yes, last but not least, we have Public Defender Luke Brownfield.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Board. I wanted to thank Alicia for the budget process this year. She was great help. The whole CAO's office was very helpful. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. Public Defender's Office provides the mandated service of providing an indigent defense for people charged with a crime. This last year, we defended about 3,500 cases. That's about 85 to 90% of the cases filed by the DA's office. Additionally, we take on other quasi-criminal cases, including conservatorships, writs reces, which are mental health hearings, and contempts. So that adds about another 500, 600 cases a year. We have 2 offices currently with 33 full-time employees. We are in talks of possibly trying to add a 3rd office to save some funds for the county because we spend so much hiring private attorneys to take the cases that our 2 offices just can't take. The goal of our office, as it's always been, is to provide zealous advocacy for clients that need it. And the change in our office has been transitioning to a holistic style of criminal defense. So we are trying to help people get back on their feet, whether that be through drug treatment, mental health treatment, but we have now employed social workers to try and get people so they get out of the criminal system instead of just helping them while they're in it. So we're kind of looking forward instead of just helping them after a crime has been committed. The ARFCA requests that we are doing are strictly to save the employees that we have. I think the funding would go to 2 full-time employees in the conflict council and 4 in the main office. And that's it. Questions? Keep it quick.
Oh, you get the award for the briefest presentation of the day. That is definitely true. Supervisor Arroyo.
So I know we talked about this a bit before, but just to put a kind of a finer point on it, I suppose, we have to provide services somehow to indigent individuals. So if we did not do that through your office, how would it happen?
It would be contract with private attorneys, which is
Okay.
what we do with
Gotcha.
the ones that we can't handle, and the expense, I would say, is about double what it would be if the public defender's office, maybe even more.
So addressing this is essentially, even though it's an additional request, it's
going to save us money in the
save
long
us
run.
money.
Yeah, that's the plan. I think what we spent, 1.7 million?
Yeah, we fund it through our Indigent Defense Fund. We've got a panel of attorneys who take that work on, and next fiscal year, we're budgeting 1.6. It was an increase of $300,000 because of the significant use that we're mandated to provide those services for.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bone.
And basically, that's not because, well, you are busy and everything else, but most of that's conflict, right? They've just.
Most of it is because
somebody's bounced between frequent
one
flyers,
office to the
frequent
other.
flyers, and then there's a time, well, none of us can touch it because we've all had a run-in.
Yeah, and that's why opening a 3rd office, there still would be some that slip through the cracks, but not nearly as many. So you would still need to contract out some, but it would be much, much less.
Great, thank you very much, and I believe that is it. Thank you for bringing us back on time here.
Thank you.
Much appreciated, and thank you all for staying. One final thing is public comment. So I will go to the Zoom, which I don't believe there's anybody in Zoom.
There's nobody.
And does anybody here in the audience today want to make a public comment?
You stayed, Stacy.
Hearing none, we are adjourned. Nope.
Chair,
Go ahead. Excuse me.
we do need to formally continue this
Yes.
budget presentation
So I'm
to
looking-
May 22nd.
I'm looking for a motion here.
I'll make a
moved.
motion that we continue the budget hearings till May 22nd at 9 a.m. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Supervisor Bushnell, seconded by Supervisor Arroyo. No public comment on this, and we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote.
My fingers aren't working so fast.
No worries.
I apologize. So it's Supervisor Bushnell and seconded by Arroyo. Supervisor
correct.
Arroyo. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's go with the roll call. So we will start with Supervisor Bone.
First. Yep.
Supervisor Madrone.
Yes.
Supervisor Wilson.
Affirmative.
Okay, Supervisor Arroyo.
Yes.
And Supervisor Bushnell.
Yep.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-0.
And before we adjourn, I want to thank the ad hoc members of the board for their hard work, along with all of the department heads and staff and the CAO's office and all the incredible work to bring this to the table. And it looks like we're going to get it all done on time this year, so kudos to all of you for your hard work. All right, thank you very much. We are adjourned.